Is that a better way of putting it?
Yes.
Yes, exactly. So it is not a statement that can be questioned in terms of is it true. But what is being debated here is not what the government does on a daily basis. What is being debated here is during this COVID period. Because even the classrooms that had been built, there was a need for more classrooms to be built.
Without COVID.
Yeah. No, without COVID.
Yeah.
There was a need for more classes to be built. Now, the question, the debate that is being brought into being is, during this time when the need has been greater, because other natural calamities have joined COVID in wreaking havoc in our lives, what has the government done?
Well, that's a good question that you ask, because there's also a story in the Standard of this young boy. We talked about this picture that went viral. And this is a family that suffered the effects of flooding, and their house had been, the house drowned. Okay?
Yeah.
And then
The house drowned.
So, yeah. So, they then were given shelter by the Red Cross. Now, unfortunately, wind came and blew away the tent.
Shelter.
Yes, that they were given by the Red Cross.
Right.
So now they were
Homeless.
yeah, basically. So now here he is in school, under the sun, with basically very little. His father, who was a fisherman, had said, look, we have very little, but the children have to go back to school. And so this picture went viral. Well-wishers have then since bought him a new uniform and shoes and such. And a neighbor has come along and says, you can stay with us for the meantime until the flooding stops, and then you're able to go back to your home. And then other well-wishers have then come out and said, that we can see how we can put up something for you makeshift in this area until things get better. Two things are happening here. One, again, we're seeing the effects of what had happened even before COVID that was not allowing children to be in school. Okay?
Right.
Home gone, shelter gone, etc. Father lost his livelihood. This has nothing to do with COVID. Father loses his home and all their possessions, and then we see that they don't have anything to live on, and then then they have to come back to school. Combined with what we talked about yesterday, that it is possible for people to come together, rally around, and help those who might be in an unfortunate situation. And we see this is a direct example of what we spoke about yesterday.
Absolutely.
Here you see children don't have uniform, don't have shoes, but they must be in school, in a place where they don't have a home. It didn't take government action to get this boy clothed, kitted, ready for school. It didn't take government action for a neighbor to say, come
stay
stay
here
with us until things get
going
better.
to school.
The child goes to school, life moves on. The father has a place to come and sleep
Has
at
new
night
uniform,
while
new
he
shoes,
continues
new
with his
socks.
fisherman's job. So
Yeah. Can you imagine now if the community actually looked at the others around here? Because this is not the only family that was affected by the flooding.
I'm sure there are many.
So can you imagine if the community just looked and said, okay, so you guys, this is where you are, all right. So Red Cross came, they put up the tent because of the vagaries of the weather. It was not possible. So this is how you can be housed, and this is how the children can be helped. Go to school.
In the year 2007, 2008, when you had all these upheavals in the country because of our elections, I saw something unique. I because I've never seen this anywhere else happening in a church. People who lived in economically challenged areas where most of the violence were in Nairobi, the church leadership asked the members to actually offer accommodation to people who had been displaced. Now, this was offered irrespective of someone's background, his ethnic community.
Matter.
It didn't matter.
Yeah.
But these people found a place to go to. Now, Kibera was hugely affected. Mlango Kubwa, all the areas you speak of were deep, but I remember looking at this and saying, goodness gracious me, this is a very, very bold thing to do. Meaning, here you are allowing people these are strangers, these aren't your relatives and neighbors.
Nope.
Complete strangers into your house because they have nowhere else. And these people didn't stay for a week. No,
they were there for some time.
they stayed for a while. And they were looked after for a while.
Yep.
Now, if that could happen, I'm certain it can happen again.
It can happen
For sure.
again.
Absolutely.
It can happen again across the country. So this is the spirit that we encouraging all of us to basically embrace the spirits of seeing how we can solve our own problems. 26 minutes to 7. Let's take another break now, see what's happening on the roads. Our live stream is up, Spice FM KE on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitter. Thank you very much for tuning into that live stream. Say hello to us. Let's know that you're clocked in. And also we'll be saying hello back at you. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Spice up your life.
Thank you.
The political class, the contestants, everybody is trying to outsteal the other.
Remorse is not taught in any school. Manners is something you get from your mother. You don't get it from your political party.
Why are we so unfocused as a country? Why are we spending money and resources? Yet we have real challenges in this country.
This coronavirus pandemic should teach us one thing, that universal healthcare is critical. Because at this point, whether you have a medical card that covers you, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Spice FM, Malindi.
Okay, so let's look at what's happening on the roads this morning. Building up very slowly on Mombasa Road. We see traffic right around the SGR going towards Cabanas, but it's not too bad. Looking at not crazy levels of traffic in the evening, however, that's a totally different story. Let's look at Thika Road, getting off from Kiambu Road onto Thika Road, right around Muthalia Corner. It's piled up there. Traffic coming all the way from Survey is very slow, but it's moving. It's great right around the Pangani underpass, then headed into the CBD. Doesn't look too bad right about now. Coming out of Westlands, getting into the CBD as well, also is looking good. We don't have too much of an issue there. Westlands, however, right around James Gishuru and then joining with Uhu Highway down, looks like it's going to be a problem. However, you can use the Red Hill bypass getting roundabout into the CBD and then onwards. Okay, let's take a look in about half an hour, see how that might have changed when most folks will be out on the roads. Talk to us, however, if you need to. Spice FM KE on Twitter or text 40127.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right.
Okay.
94.4
So the live
Spice
stream is up,
FM,
Spice FM
Nairobi.
KE on YouTube, on Facebook, and Twitter, and people already online and saying good morning. Who is there?
Okay. I can't say this name. Kihuhi. Kinyanjui. Washington. Kihuhi.
Kehiohi.
Okay.
Yes, that's how it's pronounced.
Okay.
So this Kihuhi we're going through.
That's it.
I tried.
Kehiohi Kenyajui.
Let's just go with Kinyanjui for now. Saying good morning from County 001, which is
001. Machanda's.
Jondas County. Moses Kashari is tuned in from Juja, and there's quite a number of people up this morning. Harold Ayodo is saying, wake me up when Kenya issues a travel advisory on the US. Moses Gashari also is awake this morning. Vincent Simangolwa is following all the way from Zambia this morning and says good morning. Victor Chi, good morning to you guys in the studio. I'm tuned in from 102.5 in Kisumu. Benson Kiplagat says, my favorite radio station, good morning to you this morning.
Good morning.
Everybody.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Zambia. Vincent Monde Sima Ngolwa.
Simangolwa.
Okay.
Vincent Monde Simangolwa.
Okay. All right. Welcome, Vincent, and thank you very much for tuning in and for hollering. All right. So looking at other headlines in the papers today. Dispute stalls rail extension. So there's this small bit of a 24-kilometer railway line from Maimahio Industrial Park to Longonot Town in Naivasha. It has stalled once again, raising fears that it might not be completed on time. The construction has stalled as a result of a dispute between the contractor and residents of the governor's camp in Longonot over the closure of all feeder roads to pave way for the meter gauge railway. The closure of the feeder roads by the China Road and Bridge Corporation saw tens of students miss classes, while tens of homes were rendered inaccessible. The contractor has closed all the feeder roads in the area so that they allow the railway pass through without giving an alternative. Now, because of that, guys are like, what do you mean? What do you mean? So now we stop our lives because you're putting up a railway? Pana. So it has that has caused a bit of a delay. Simple things that just require,
Public participation?
Yeah, just a conversation with the community. Just understand, look, this is a road, all right? So clearly there are people who use it. Okay, so what do we do?
You would think it was common sense, right? It's not. So,
Daily business?
NIS seeks tenants' phones from landlords in a new bill. Landlords, this is in the future.
NIS is those intelligence guys.
NIS is that particular branch of security we used to call a special branch.
Bus.
Okay. Landlords and property owners will be required to keep a registry of tenants under a proposed law that is likely to raise further concerns about the surveillance by state security agencies. The tenants registry, landlord, tenant, you keep a registry,
right,
can be made available to the state and will contain personal details such as names,
right,
postal address,
right,
phone numbers,
right,
and emails.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, the National Intelligence Services has lobbied the National Assembly's administration and National Security Committee to include the requirements of the registry in the Narcotics, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Control Amendment Bill.
So this is about narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances.
Under that one, they said, can you just slip
Can
this
you
one?
just add in this one so we know walevi wako wapi saa ngapi?
Saa ngapi, yes. And landlords will be expected to conduct due diligence or background checks on the tenants, which will include their employment station, home country, to allow for easy tracking. So essentially, if you're a landlord, you'll be a voluntary NIS officer.
Okay, so let's just be objective here. Number one, when it comes to matters of security, we have other structures. We have a Nyumba Kumi. What is the whole idea of Nyumba Kumi? Nyumba Kumi is you as the head of this Nyumba Kumi cluster. You know everything about the people who live here.
Yep.
Okay, so you've got that. You've got the details. You've got name. At least you need to have some telephone contact. Okay. And then some background information. So this person is a business person and they trade in this and that. Or this person is an employee and they work in such and such an organization. That's it. The importance of that is know your neighbor. If you have nothing to hide, what does it matter? I live here anyway. I have signed the lease agreement with my tenant and I have indicated all those things that you're talking about. This is a lease agreement entered between so-and-so, landlord, and so-and-so, lessee, right? And I have put in my name, my ID, I have put in my details.
Yes.
So,
you know, remember, these are details that are contained elsewhere.
Yes.
There's this sneaky feeling that we're being over-policed.
Sneaky feeling from whom?
Me.
Okay, sneaky feeling. Got it.
Yes. That is too much.
Yes, but also there's a rational part of my mind that tells me there is a reason why this is being done, okay? And I'm not certain. I'm not certain as to whether they want to ensure that they've documented everybody who can pay tax. Remember, they keep... Oh, yeah, you see where I'm going with this? Because by the time background, where they work, where they do this, why do you want all these details? The employer already has details of these people. The employer has... Just think of the places we go to, the things we do, and who has our details. Just think about it for a single second.
Yeah.
Kind of creepy.
Yes. What is being asked for here already exists in other domains.
Yes.
And then we're told that we'll do a number. Now we'll have everything in one place.
Right.
Okay? So clearly it doesn't have everything in one place.
They should be able to harmonize it. Basically, I think that, and I see the point you're making. The point here is on efficiency. If you've got a system that can gather all this information, it should be easier for you. Okay, so let's say Huduma number, it gives you that number, and that number also now brings in the PIN. So from PIN, you're able to know whether this person is earning a salary because there is a payee being remitted. From PIN, you're able to know whether this person runs a bank account because the banks are mandated and they're required to have your PIN if they're giving you an account. So from just that central location, you can tell this person has these bank accounts, this person works here, this person does this and the other. Then now the other bit would be, okay, so where does this person live? So how would the government gather that information of where the person lives?
You see, the Huduma number was supposed to do this, really. But why my mind went towards, I began by saying perhaps it is taxes. Perhaps it is because, again, just for security reasons, you really want to know who is where.
Yeah.
What they do, what their background is. It's not complicated because it is very easy to rent a house without giving too many details. But even as this progresses, we're heading more and more towards where a place like America is. Now, America, for many people, this is my opinion, of course, is a police state. It's just that people don't understand it, but it is a police state. A place where you cannot transact anything for all the freedoms that they claim to give you without the state knowing. What do you think that is?
Yep.
Honestly, you can't. Everything about your transaction and everything that has to do with it is known. So
it's known, it's tracked. And then you're using now the cards to make purchases. They can just tell, okay, so this time CT's card has been used in such and such a place.
In this county and in this whatever. Yes.
This time.
So slowly, without even announcing it, you demonize cash. And cash is seen as something even negative. In fact, when you have cash, you're seen as a criminal. Why are you not using your card?
Yeah, you don't want to be tracked.
Why don't you just use your card? And there are places who will not accept cash.
Yep.
And places which accept cash are considered to be slightly shady. Okay. Now,
because it's off the books.
There are things that the government needs to do which it often doesn't need to explain to us, but in some cases it might help to just explain
it and say, this is why
this is our thinking, so that you limit the level of speculation that we may be driven towards.
Well, I guess then, and this is where now you expect Parliament to do its work. So NIS, in its own wisdom, has asked Parliament, could you amend this and include this? So during that entire proceeding of making this amendment to the law, that's where these matters should come up.
Yes.
At the committee stage, NIS come in. So why exactly do you want this? So they come in and it's public. This is why we want it. The committee makes its report, which is public. This is what they told us. This is why they want it. And so let's all debate it. And it's debated in a public forum called Parliament. So everybody then gets to hear, okay, so this is what they want. Does it make sense to us? Does it not make sense to us? And our representatives, because they represent us, they'll then make argument on our behalf.
This is what would be
for or against.
This is what is playing out in your mind, right?
Yes, that's what I'm hoping, that this kind of things.
It seems that you too have taken up residency in the ideal world.
Oh yes. Let's just take another quick break at 13 minutes to 7 o'clock. This is a Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Hey, there are more and more people who are tuned in from other parts of the world. The Middle East is Karam Arbab. Hamzwe is in Zambia. Eunice Yare is in Somaliland. Patrick Loturi is the land of the democracy. America. All right. Honorable Reagan. Where is he? Honorable Reagan is somewhere. Okay. Charity is in somewhere.
Whatever that is.
Charity is also not in the country. She's in Nakuru. All of you. Good morning. Okay. We appreciate everybody who's locked in this morning. Asanteni sana. Welcome to the Situation Room.
They are smart. They are funny and unfailingly entertaining. They are the adults in the room, and they are here to help you be the best adult you can be.
Just to be very honest with each other here. Not all of us are going to get tall, dark, and handsome. Not all of us are going to get 0.5s or chotaras. Some of us have to learn the short guys. Some of us have to learn those pot-bellied people. Some of us have to learn older men or younger men.
Spice.
Don't ask your partner if he or she enjoyed it. I think the approach should always be, if she's enjoyed the journey, she will let you know.
Yeah.
She'll tell you, hey, maze, your bus is big. Mi sijaipanda basi kubwa kama hii. Juu hata hii basi, hiyo mafuta tulieka yote, imetuleta hapa vizuri. Hii basi iko na nguvu. Hii basi iko na nguvu.
Spice.
Now into a relationship, it becomes like you've stopped your life, and then now me, I am your life. You see, like, what happened to your life? What happened to you? What did you
And
used to do?
women are guilty about that. No,
Is your wife listening to the show?
Whether it is matters of the heart, finances, or work that's weighing on your mind, worry not. The adults in the room will help you stay winning. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right.
All right.
94.4 Spice FM.
Okay, so let's look at that story, right? Union boss among 514 sacked medics. It's on the back page of The Nation. 428 striking nurses fired in Kisumu and 86 doctors and specialists fired in Mombasa. A top doctors union official is among the 514 health workers who have been sacked after government made good their threat to let go of striking health workers. The Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentists Union Secretary General Chibanzi Machanda was among medics fired in Mombasa. Kisumu Governor Anyang' Nyong'o yesterday fired 428 nurses who were on strike for absconding duty, while his Mombasa counterpart Hassan Joho fired doctors and specialists, 86 in number. The doctors received their marching orders from County Secretary Jezian Farouk, while the nurses were notified of their sack by Acting Health Officer Gregory Ganda. I beg your pardon. All the officers in this list have been removed from the payroll henceforth, and those who erroneously received their December salaries, not having worked, shall have the same recovered, according to Mr. Ganda. The decision to send the health workers packing is likely to further strain the relationship between health professionals and the county bosses. Mr. Machanda said the issues surrounding their sacking are labour-related, adding that the governors have chosen the wrong approach. The approach taken will endanger the lives of many Kenyans. By denying health services to Kenyans, they are sabotaging the universal health care agenda. This was according to Dr. Machanda. In a statement, the KMPDU condemned the firing of the health workers, accusing governors of brinksmanship in handling of the welfare of medical staff. KMPDU has demanded the immediate reinstatement of the doctors and establishment of a constitutional health service commission to standardize management of human resources for health. The healthcare situation in the country will likely be further strained as the medical laboratory workers, remember them from yesterday, and clinical officers begin their strike today, joining nurses who have been on strike for weeks.
Let's discuss this in greater detail in the 7 o'clock hour as we are joined by Chibanzi Mochonda, who no longer has a job and he has loans to pay and all those things. So people who are working in these counties, imagine you haven't received a salary for a couple of months. There is money that should have been remitted. It was not being remitted. And then you're receiving now from your bank, you're receiving the demand. Wait, you have a loan. What's happening?
This XYZ is due on this date. The banks remind you gently. That's
and there was a
check-off.
There was a check-off that was to be coming from your employer straight into this account. Hasn't come. Kumeendaje? Hey, so let's have that conversation with them in the next hour. Meanwhile, Mutura has appointed people in Nairobi into the executive. And remember the lady called Janet Ouko, who had been fired by Governor Mike Sonko. Yep. She was the education CEC. So Mutura has brought her back and he has appointed her as a county executive committee member for education. He has also appointed activist Brian Weke to be his legal advisor to the office of governor. Brian Weke and Mr. Mutura really have a relationship, actually. They have both said they grew up together, they know one another. So he's a man that he knows very well. Changes were part of Mutura's first executive task since taking office, and he handed Ouko a lifeline after 2 years in the cold following the resignation from City Hall. She resigned, but they had issues with the governor, just before her resignation. She has replaced Lucia Mulwa, who's been moved to agriculture. Here, when I saw this, other cabinet members include Mohamed Dagane, Transport, Hitan Majedvia, Health, Alan Igambi, Finance, Kerich, Urban Planning, Veska Kangogo, Devolution, Newton Munene, Information. So this were, and the Chief of Staff role has been given to Paul Mutunga, replacing Peter Mogo, who had been appointed by Sonko. This man is an acting governor of Nairobi. Right?
Yes.
Acting. I remember the case where the then acting governor of Kiambu, before he was made governor, and that is the current governor, what's his name again? Dr. Nyoro. So when Dr.
James
Nyoro
Nyoro
was acting as governor before the impeachment of Babayao, he tried to do the same, to reshuffle the CECs. And the CECs took that matter to court. And the court agreed that in law, in an acting capacity, you don't have the substantive powers to hire and fire. So you cannot hire and fire. You cannot even make those changes that you're trying to make. So there's already a case law on this matter. So why would we have then an acting governor in Nairobi with the legal advice of his friend, Brian Weke, appointing him as legal advisor?
Maybe that was the legal advice he got.
I don't know. Maybe I misread
No.
the Kiambu issue.
But I remember very clearly that matter of Kiambu went to court, and we know what the declaration was.
Yeah.
Why don't we allow the citizens of Nairobi who feel aggrieved, Nairobi County that is, take this matter to court so that the court can retell us again what the legal standing on this matter is.
Yeah.
Because I am certain that Mr. Mutura means well, but well-meaning cannot substitute
the law.
Yeah, no, it can't. It doesn't matter how you compound it and how you build it up, it cannot.
The law is the most well-meaning of the two.
It is the wellest meaning.
Yes, of the two. So let's wait and see how that happens. Hiya. I'm sure you have another big story.
Yes, there are very many big
meanwhile,
stories.
as you come up with that one, in Nyamira,
Well, yeah.
where we buried the former governor Nyagarama and the new governor was sworn in yesterday, Mr. Nyeribo. So, not yesterday, he was sworn in last month. Mr. Nyeribo has now unveiled his new lineup. Remember, he came and just did away with the others. Mr. Nyagarama's cabinet.
Out to go.
Now he has appointed his new cabinet. He has nominated his new cabinet, and now we'll see what happens. Yeah. So a deputy governor comes in, and you would expect that, a deputy, because they were working with the governor, then they were very much in tandem on who sits where and who does what job in their cabinet. But we saw that in Bomet. We've seen now this in Nyamira. Deputy governor, sworn in as governor, says, in fact, in Bomet, he said, let's revet all of them. And those that don't meet out, I get new ones.
At least he was technical about it.
He went through, a bit of a, let's revet.
But remember also, if you're a deputy governor and you are now governor, because unforeseen circumstances Providence has seen it fit to bequeath this particular gift to you, you then have to think of a time when you may fight for the seat again. So what do? You start preparing yourself for that fight early, and you bring in your team.
There's also the other reality. And the other reality here is that deputy governors are actually nobodies in the counties.
Yep.
That's why the CECs don't even feel like they owe you anything. So that CECs treat you with utmost contempt, yet you're the deputy governor. And that's why when you're now appointed as governor, you're like,
now it's my turn to stick it to you guys.
Right. Guess what?
I'm here now.
Now it's me. Go.
Meaning, now that I'm here, I shall give you the gift of sight.
And what
you
does
will
that
see.
tell you then about what we have? Governor and deputy appointed in the same ticket, campaigning together. You'd assume that then they're running the affairs of the county together, and clearly they're not.
You talked about a workplace culture, and you talk about tradition. If you look at our political sphere, The one tradition that traverses that sphere consistently is one of loyalty and how it is displayed. All right? If you were the top honcho, people will be stepping on each other and they'll be walking all around each other to try and display that they, more than anybody else, are your keenest supporters and they're the ones who are most loyal. And that is why they will even try and anticipate what they think you might want to do, or you may think, or you may want to pronounce and act on your behalf. Now, what this also involves is what you just stated. If there's a deputy, that person will be ignored to smithereens, meaning you will not exist.
But it comes from the boss. If the boss is showing everybody that I have utmost disregard for this person and contempt, then that's why everybody else treats that person.
That way.
Anyway, it's 7 o'clock. Let's discuss this bit in the next hour. Good morning.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
All right, Sugar Road building up very slowly this morning, guys. Heading now towards Landis Road and then out towards industrial area as well. It's moving very, very slowly. We will see if that becomes bumper-to-bumper situation, but as yet, not just. Okay, coming off of Thika Road, entering into the CBD, it's slow, but it's moving. There's an overturned truck along the southern bypass as you approach the Dagoretti interchange. Please approach with caution. That is yet to have been cleared off, and they're waiting for people to come and do that this morning. Remember, overturned truck along the southern bypass as you approach the Dagoretti corner, so please be careful if you're headed in that direction, if you're coming from there, because that's what lies ahead. Okay, coming out of Westlands, also a bit slow. The Red Hill bypass up for use. You can use that, get around much quicker if you want to think about it. Wangari Maathai Road, also an option to get into the CBD if you're coming from Thika Road right now. It's not clogging up much anywhere else. Coming off from Gong Road, coming off of Langata Road, getting into the CBD out as well. Not too bad at the moment. We'll look at how that builds up as traffic hour continues. Talk to us though if you need to. Spice FM KE on Twitter or text 40127.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room.
2.5 minutes after 7. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. And we thank you very much for tuning in this morning on radio, online, www.spicefm.co.ke or spicefmke on YouTube, on Facebook and Twitter. More and more people who are saying hello to us this morning from across the globe. For example, that globe part called Nandi County, Laban Tanui Kiptalel is there. No, Kaptel. Laban Tanui Kaptel. Tekla Acheng Adele, good morning. Adam. So how do you pronounce your name, Adam? Is it Zachariah? Zachariah? How would you pronounce it? Zachariah. That's the CNN guy who calls himself Zachariah has spoiled this name.
It's just the affectation, it's the pronouncement. I think that is the influence of his mother tongue. And I know it's mistakenly referred to as English, but it's actually American.
It's Americanese.
It is American.
Okay. Here, Adam says, chaos in Ghana's parliament as they try to elect a speaker.
Why don't we just send a team that understands BBI to these countries who seem to be having a problem with simple things that we have long understood and we've known how to handle?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It could be a worthwhile export. And these are our friends. Ghanaians are our friends. Yes.
So we tell them to read and take up BBI.
So look, let us send you some people who can advise you on how you can manage these things.
And then they'll ask you, so this BBI, how does it work? We don't know. We want to vote for it.
That's the whole point. So everybody, how will you know it will work? You let people talk about it at great length. Yes.
It is an idea.
And they'll give you the
Whose
idea
time
what
has come.
Precisely. And they'll tell you what can be done, what can't be done. Then you can make your decision.
Yeah. Then you shall decide. So, for example, in this, if you're trying to elect a speaker for the Parliament of Ghana, just look at the two main parties. Give one the speaker, give the other the deputy speaker,
Yes.
and make it rotational. If you preside over a speaker this time, the next time you shall preside over as deputy speaker.
Yes.
If you earn the salary of a speaker this month, the next month you earn the salary of a deputy speaker. That way it's win-win. There's no winner take all.
Okay. Good luck.
It's winner takes today.
Yes, and if you're having difficulties with it, well, that's the difficulty that comes with this juggling. Yes.
Yeah.
So don't take it to heart.
Don't take it to heart.
No.
Today's proverb, City.
Righty, righty, righty. The archer loves the arrow that flies as much as he loves the bow that remains.
The archer loves the arrow that flies.
As much as he loves the bow that remains.
Bow that remains. This is from which part of Africa?
Nigeria, of course.
All right. It's another Nigerian
Nigerians
proverb.
are just good people.
They are very good people, yes.
Yeah. They're hunters
They're what?
and gatherers. Who uses bows and arrows?
Cupid.
All right. So Cupid was Nigerian. That's why yesterday's proverb was also
You see?
about love.
No, this week
And Nigeria.
we are talking about love, my brother.
Yeah.
So if you're tired of listening, next week I will talk about something else.
It'll
But
change.
this week
is love.
love.
Nesa sawa. Nesa sawa. As we come to talk about yes. Oh.
So, our greetings that normally come from Yangon. So now they're coming from Nairobi.
The Yangonese is here.
Yeah. The Yangonites.
Hey, the Yangonite. Bring her in tomorrow. Yes.
Okay.
Gotta come and say hello, to everybody else.
Specifically say hi to Eric and City.
Come and say hi to the listeners.
Okay.
Yeah. In recognition of safe travels from Yangon in Myanmar. Then you take her to Burma. Tell her, this
is the real
This
Burma.
is the Burma. And then you buy her Burma mandazi.
Okay.
Tell her, now, you see, you guys eat this kind of stuff there. This is Burma. Chana yo yenu Myanmar. Right.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, very good morning to her as well. And we appreciate that she's on. Before we went to the top of the hour, we were looking at this whole issue of deputy governors coming in and making changes. So we've seen this many times. Whenever there is a vacancy in the office, even if it's a temporary vacancy in the office of the governor, the person who comes in as deputy, the first thing they want to do is assert their own authority and exert it by shuffling the cabinet or firing everybody in the cabinet. Even in an acting capacity, Dr. James Nyoro, when he was the acting governor of Kiambu, he had tried to do this. We have seen this happening now with the acting governor of Nairobi. We have seen it happen with the new governor, who is the former deputy governor of Nyamira County. Fired the entire, brought in.
Have you mentioned Bomet?
I was going there.
Okay.
We saw also it happening in Bomet, where the new governor, who is a former deputy governor, comes in and says, okay, so we have these CECs. This is just after 1.5 years in office as governor and deputy. We have these CECs that like us to revert them.
And you would assume that as deputy, he was involved in the process of appointing
them.
These CECs.
And even supervising them.
Yes. So this matter of vetting them, where exactly does it come in?
Mm-mm.
But with the eye on the ultimate prize that was coming in the not too distant future, I think the argument would be the people who were then CECs were predominantly appointees of the governor. Who was no longer there.
Mm.
So
then you would see the same thing play out when the deputy who now becomes governor would also want to appoint his own quote-unquote people into the same positions.
This is not unusual.
No, it's not. It really isn't.
It's not unusual.
Mm-mm.
Some people go about it in a way that is smarter than others, or at least the appearance is smarter. Others are just use a blunt instrument, just remove and replace.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because, okay, You can have that, very idealistic argument and say, maybe the deputy has because they've been sitting there, they've been observing how these people are working, they already have an idea of how these people work, their work ethic and their capacity and capabilities. So he's basically trying to revamp and rejig and bring in fresh energy into the cabinet. But the truth of the matter is, it basically just shows you how a deputy governor works in a county. Deputy governor is just somebody to be seen, to be given some car to drive around. There are some cases where we hear of a deputy governor who has been operating as a deputy governor. In fact, they just drive around in a pickup. Written, County Government of X. CECs are there in the big guzzlers, the Prados and all. They're the ones who are driving that. Some CECs even with bodyguards. Deputy governor is just uko. Deputy governor does not get to have a say, does not cannot come and tell a CEC anything.
They are glorified send-arounds.
Yes.
If the governor can't make it, the government not feeling well, doesn't particularly want that gig,
you go. Those are your people anyway.
And once in a while, you may have a trip to Nairobi. That is, of course, if you're not already in Nairobi.
Yep.
And every once in a while, in the days when it was possible, you might have a trip abroad. Yes. But by and large, you are a glorified send-around.
So whereas it's a good thing then to have a deputy governor, does it, it's a good thing in that it gives us that insurance. We do not have to have a by-election in Nyamira, for example. It was very clear this is a transition. Deputy, this one has gone, the deputy takes over. We didn't have to go through that entire transition process. It was very clear what happens. Whereas that's a good thing, is just having the deputy governors the way they are right now of any benefit to us as citizens. This person is sitting there, they are earning salaries of over 700,000 shillings every month, and yet they are not doing any meaningful work. They're just sitting, waiting on the eventuality that this person shall either be impeached or they shall die.
Can you imagine? That's the
they're useful. They are useful because if they, in as much as what you say is absolutely true, I think the deputy governors give us a very clear picture of who their governors are. Because anyone who treats their deputy with a certain degree of respect and even assign specific duties that are known that this, you go to the deputy, all right? That is, if they exist. It tells you about the individual who is governor. But on the other hand, if the position of deputy, as I said, is a glorified send-around, then it also tells you about something about the governor. And it also tells you that the choice was made at the beginning with the understanding that this is somebody who will not amount to anything. Or, if I may put it in lay Kenyan terms, won't be a threat to my position.
Right.
Because deputies who have appeared to exert themselves normally end up on the wrong side of their governors. And it's not that they're opposing the governor, they're just appearing to actually do something.
Yeah.
And the governors more or less expect them to do everything at their behest. Means that if the governor doesn't tell you, you don't do. Even if you see and you know it needs to be done, you still don't do.
It's interesting because when the governor, at the point of campaigns before election, is selecting this individual who will run with them, there's certain things they select them for, right? We see that often, if we look around the governors in Kenya and the deputy governors, you'll find that they've selected technocrats, they have selected professionals in certain career sectors to run along with them. But then you realize that they didn't do it because of the work that they would offer in the county. They've made that selection so that hopefully that shine would rub off on them for the purpose of election. Now, woe unto you as the deputy governor if you now get into the office and start to show your professional skill, your might. Because if anything, it doesn't do anything except show the governor in quote-unquote bad light. So the very thing that won the governorship is the same thing that it could essentially get you in trouble as the deputy governor. So it's like, get us into office, and then after that, be quiet. We don't really need your skill. It was to get me into
It was just
office.
to get me in.
Yeah.
And because I come from this part of the county and you come from the other part of the county which has votes, so we can campaign.
As a unifying force.
So we can use you to convince the people on the other side that, their person is also going to be in the governor's mansion. But the truth of the matter is, that's all not going to happen. And so the person who's accepting to be a running mate of this candidate who's going for governor, what is it that convinces them to join that ticket?
I think maybe under the delusion that they could get into office and actually
But
do
we'll
something
do things
impactful.
together.
Yes, we'll do things together. We will develop. We will move forward. We will come up with great and lofty plans for the county. Yeah. It's
So
it's
this
delusion.
This is what you're actually being
Believing.
being
Duped to
lured
believe.
with.
Yes, that we are going forth to make a change. But actually, I'm using you for
If you were a first term governor wannabe or deputy, I can understand if you are taken in by that. By the time we've had the first term over, you have a case study. You know how to look at this thing and you know how to study it.
You've
But
seen what has happened to
yes,
the
you-
others.
Yes, you do. And also, by the time you become someone's running mate, there's an understanding that the two of you have. They don't just select you and you happily agree. No, people talk, agree. Or you ask, look, I need someone. Look, there's a whole discourse that takes place before this happens.
Yeah.
This son of ours, I think, is now, when someone gets that seat, you get the impression that the deputy governors tend to be the gentler people. They don't kick a fuss.
They don't kick a fuss, but I also think that they get to the point where they realize either one, they've been hoodwinked with some kind of professional sweet talk before that. Because the things that you're saying now, they've had a discussion. They've had a discussion for a long time.
You have an understanding.
And they've
In
been,
fact, when you're running the
you
campaign, you
yeah.
see it happening.
Yeah.
Because every time, wait, what do you think? What should we tell? How should we? In fact, you do the manifesto.
Now, does this discourse? We had the deputy governor of Nyeri, who's the chair of the deputy governor's council. What did she say to us? We actually don't do anything. We're not consulted about the runnings. We don't know. We
Nothing.
just sit there. But before this, before you actually get into the office, you are consulted regularly. You are asked, how do we go about this? What should we do? Who do we? So it's clear to me, it's delusion. Yeah, it is. Because you actually think that you're going to make an impact, but you're really not. You're being used to put that particular individual in that seat. Thereafter, you lose your use.
Aye.
It's quite sad, isn't it?
It's and that's what I was asking. So maybe it makes sense for the deputy governors to demand that they are given a portfolio. You come in,
Yes.
and it's very clear in law that this shall be the portfolio. All right. Either you specify, or and that's what I was
Or you
asking
choose,
the deputy
yeah.
governor for Nyeri. If you don't say what portfolio, you can just be given one portfolio that then does not even receive the
Doesn't
support.
matter.
You'll be given that portfolio that's called, women and youth and gender and something,
An environment.
an environment, which does not even get enough budgetary allocation and all. So you have a portfolio, yes, but you have zero say. You have a chief officer, that's a PS, who does not even report to you. They report straight to the governor. You have senior officers in that department who don't. They just look at you as the CEC.
Because they know that this seat of yours essentially is, quote unquote,
Yeah.
obsolete.
You can't fire me. You cannot do anything. You cannot even discipline me.
Nope. Can't ask me, can't demand any kind of duty of me because you are not the person that I report to.
So is 700,000 a good price to pay for that, for all this,
For doing
as
nothing.
citizens?
But you know what? Think about it. If we say that because that's what has happened. If you look at the selection of deputy governor for Nairobi, look at the selection of deputy governor for Nyeri County. At the time that there was a deputy governor in Nairobi, right? Technocrats in their own right, professionals, whether in business, professionals in finance. Dr. Karugo is a doctor of finance, for example. So here you ask yourself, there are ways in which they could actually contribute to the runnings of the county.
Yep.
So by the time you're selecting this individual, I do agree, there should be demarcation in terms of what sector they can actually come and work in. It's not just to deputize the governor, but be given a portfolio under which they can work and serve. Because the truth is, 47 times 700,000 is the money you're wasting.
So say clearly that a deputy shall have this particular portfolio.
Job description.
Just like what you used to see in the Moi government. Vice President was Minister for Home Affairs.
Yes.
Actually, it started in the days
Of Kenyatta. Yep.
Yes.
Vice President and Minister for Home Affairs.
Affairs.
Right now we have a deputy president who is nothing apart from just being a deputy president. Nothing. Cannot even read the president's speech in a funeral.
He wasn't always nothing, was he?
No. But you see, that's the danger we have. This particular time, we have a deputy president who wakes up
And looks the way you look.
and is wondering, okay, so now
What's happening today?
Doesn't know. Has no portfolio. Cannot do anything, really. And even if you appear for a meeting, if the president decides to send another emissary to that meeting,
It's that emissary who's going to sort.
Yep.
And if they ask you to make a decision, what are you going to say? We'll get back to you. Because
Yeah.
you know what? You don't have
You
the
don't
powers
have
to
any
execute.
powers. We are paying so much to maintain this particular person. We are paying so much for people who work under the office of the deputy governor or under the office of the deputy president. And yet, these people, all they're doing is sitting there and waiting for.
Let's go back to this culture we have of how it is that our people believe what is believed to be the correct conduct in political situations, and what is believed to be the expected behavior that we should demonstrate to people in positions of leadership. Okay. Now, loyalty is one of them. Now, deference is a manifestation of loyalty for some people. Running around and seeking to do political good as you see it in the name of the leader is one of them. Shouting loudly about what you think is will promote the goodwill and the excellent political and administrative track record of the leader is also something important. But again, if you look at our county systems, and we're going to compare with the national system, the reason why the county governments are such a big issue is because they have money. And with money comes power. So whether you're an MCA, whether you're an MP, whether you're even a senator, everything more or less gravitates around the governor. And then they're his people. Or happy. We don't have a lady governor. We do.
We
Oh,
we have a couple.
We have two.
Yeah, Anwai Guru and Charity Ngilu.
Yes. There are people who gravitate around these people, and it's not as though it's a permanent position where once you get it, you stay. There are other people who want that position, and there's a constant battle for those positions. So can you imagine the jostling that takes place? And what do you think happens? Now, in all that jostling, the deputy governor is going to be absolutely nowhere.
Does not feature.
No, but he's a political convenience. That's why they came into being. Yes. Chosen because you represent a place that is necessary for this election to take place the way it is. Probably, you come from the same place as the governor you're seeking to unseat comes from.
Yep.
So you're telling the people, it's not as though we're not giving you anything.
Yeah, we're not leaving you empty-handed.
No.
So and so.
It's going to be deputy.
Yeah.
So the services you enjoyed, you will still continue enjoying. But consider for a single second, who are the real power brokers, A, in a national government, and B, a county government? Deputy governor is definitely not a power broker. So who are the people? Is it the party officials within them? Is it the party bigwigs? Is it the friends that you never hear of but you know exist, or you don't know but you know exist within? Who is it? In all these things, the deputy governor is a nobody. They don't feature.
And that's rather unfortunate.
Because
we have... I keep going back to... all these things as you're playing your games there, I am paying to maintain an office.
Exactly. This is the question I wanted to ask. When devolution was being instituted around, and so now we had the counties and then you had governor, deputy governor. At that point, with that institution being set up, what was the plan? Just to have a deputy governor for the sake of having a deputy because, somebody needs to have an assistant or somebody needs to have a deputy for name alone? What I would like to know, those who put it in there, what was the original
plan? Many things were being floated around
Yeah.
and bandied around. One was that issue of succession planning. The second thing was so that you do not keep playing the politics of dangling a carrot of, I can hire and fire you. And that's why, in fact, you come in at the point of nomination to participate in an election, so that this person is elected alongside you and you can't fire them. So you don't now keep playing that whole game of I can fire you. I'm going to appoint so and so. It becomes an issue. Anyway, let's take a break here at 23 minutes past 7. See the weather and then continue the conversation. So we're having issues with our phone lines this morning. We want to have a conversation about the health sector. What is happening? We're still seeing clinical officers, lab technicians going on strike. We are seeing doctors being fired in Mombasa, nurses being fired in Kisumu, others not receiving their salaries in Kakamega. So what is it that's happening in our health sector? And the same thing we're discussing about governors and how they treat their deputies. Let's talk about governors and how they treat healthcare and also how they treat their workers. Good morning. This is Kenya's biggest conversation.
Spice FM.
Hey, it's getting hot in here. The media has greatly contributed to the moral rot that we experience in this country.
I remember a senior politician telling me, point blank, nobody steals in the field, it's stolen in the granary. So my friend, if you're going to win an election, jipange kwa granary.
I think we are suffering from Stockholm syndrome. Our violator and abuser is also our redeemer in our mind.
The whole political class, the whole political institution is rotten. It is based on ideals that cannot progress our country forward.
This is the Situation Room. The only way to start your day.
This morning, we're going to see highs of 27 today and lows of 16. It's going to be remaining this way for most of the day. Nakuru clear at 13, highs of 27, highs of 26 in Nyeri, partly cloudy conditions right now at 12. It's clear in Eldoret at 10, highs of 25. 20 degrees and mostly cloudy in Kisumu this morning. The high will be 28. We're looking at highs of 31 in Kakamega, where it's partly cloudy at 13 at the moment. Partly sunny conditions in Mombasa at 24. We'll see highs of 32. Partly cloudy at 13, highs of 30. And we're seeing 27 Kampala. Mostly clear conditions at 20, coming down to lows of 18. Light rain in Dar es Salaam at 27, highs of 32. And we're seeing light rain in Johannesburg at 17 degrees, highs of 21. The high will be 32 in Lagos, 26 at the moment, light rain and lows of 25. Looking at Kinshasa, we'll see rain showers through most of the morning, highs of 30, coming back down to lows of 24.
Sugar and spice and everything nice, everything nice.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM.
Okay,
Nairobi.
it's 26 minutes after 7. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. It's a situation room. So we're discussing the issue that's happening in the counties. So doctors, CT, in Mombasa have been told to step. A number of them have been dismissed by the county, by the governor of Mombasa. Mombasa County government has made true its threat and sacked 86 doctors over what the CEC for Health, Jaisen Farouk, regarded as gross misconduct. In a letter, the sacked medical doctors failed to return to work as directed by the county's Public Service Board and the Health Department. Among those sacked is the KMPDU Secretary General Dr. Machanda and other senior specialists. In a letter signed by Farouk, the doctors were ordered to surrender all the property belonging to the county government to their superiors. Everything that you need, return to your superiors. Following the correspondence shared between the Department of Health and the County Public Service Board on doctor strike, the board, pursuant to Section 59 of the County Government Act, hereby conveys its decision via special board meeting held on the day before yesterday, on the 5th of January, that all doctors who failed and or neglected to return to work be dismissed. They received the dismissal via email sent to them by the County Health Department. You see, the doctors downed their tools on the 2nd of December, and because of unpaid dues and non-remittance of loans. This is an issue that was there even before the national strike by the doctors. It was a trade dispute between the doctors in Mombasa County and the county government. So there was unpaid salaries and there was non-remittances of loans. So you've taken up a loan and there's a whole check-off system where then the county government should be remitting this money to the bank. And then you start receiving messages from the bank saying, my friend, check-off has not come in and we need you to now make alternative arrangements. And then those alternative arrangements are not made. So they downed their tools from the 2nd of December. They didn't go back to work. According to Coast Branch Secretary Abidan Mwachi, the county government took them to court and the matter was yet to be determined, and therefore it should have followed the due process. According to Mwachi, we'll move to court to get an injunction over this illegal sacking and dismissal. The county took us to court and the matter is yet to be determined. Meanwhile, the KMPDU says its members will continue with their strike and advise them to not appear before the disciplinary committee. That is Mombasa. In Kisumu, the county government has dismissed more than 400 nurses on strike for absconding duty. The nurses have been ordered to immediately return government properties in their possession to the administration. The personnel on annual leave have been directed to report back to work within 48 hours, according to Health and Sanitation Chief Officer Gregory Ganda. This announcement was made in a communication to the nurses listing those dismissed. Governor Anyang' Nyong'o's administration had given the striking nurses 7 days to return to work because the county had addressed their grievances. The notice lapsed in late December. Before yesterday's sacking, there were 1,200 nurses in Kisumu. The government is accusing the nurses of downing their tools just for the sake of solidarity with nurses from other counties. However, the National Union of Nurses disregarded the communication, insisting they were all on legal strike and would not bow to sacking threats. So this is another issue there. Okay. Then there's the issue of Kakamega and which other county? Is it Vihiga? Is it Busia? Where they have said we are not going to pay you. Kakamega and Busia withhold salaries of striking medics. Busia and Kakamega counties have made good their threat not to pay healthcare workers for the month of December. Governors Sospito Jamong of Busia and Wycliffe Oparanya of Kakamega have said the striking nurses will be sacked. In Busia, the directive by the executive to expunge medics from the payroll has affected some senior officers in the Department of Health. Standard has established that only the executive committee member for health and sanitation and his two chief officers received a salary last month. Only the minister and the PS received a salary. Everybody else in that department did not receive a salary. Governor of Jamong's administration opted to crack the whip on the striking healthcare workers by first withholding their salaries. A director in the health department told the Standard yesterday that they were not likely to receive their January salaries unless a solution is reached in the ongoing industrial action. This has happened now. Kakamega, Busia. There were two other counties in Nyanza that already there were issues. Workers had gone on strike previously. Now we have Mombasa. We have heard the issue of Kirinyaga, which has even gone to court. It has been there for a while. We had the issue of Laikipia, which the same thing had happened in Laikipia. Healthcare workers strike, healthcare workers sacked, or healthcare workers disciplined. What is this that's happening? And is this a matter of two egos just being too strong?
It's not even so much of two egos being strong, Eric. It could be, but consider, what do you think is the example that anyone in top leadership seeks to follow? In a Kenyan sense, in an African sense, obedience that does not accommodate any alternative view. Obedience to what is said, irrespective of how wrong it is or how skewed it is, but so long it has been spoken, it is considered something that should be followed without too many questions. Now, if the leadership at the very, very top, whether it is a political party leader, whether it is a national leader, whether it is the president, the deputy, the minister, if you listen to utterances of our leaders, the utterances tend to be dictatorial. It's like, I have spoken. And why are you not listening? Now, if you don't listen, then consequences will follow. It is not only draconian, it is Neanderthal, it belongs to the era of the Cro-Magnons, it is prehistoric. There is nothing that is being discussed about the healthcare workers that actually a solution cannot be found to. But the clear deficit in understanding the need to treat others well and to talk about things realistically, because these are behind door discussions. We're not telling you, for instance, tell the whole country or the whole county what's going on. Call the leaders and tell them, folks, this is what's going on. I'm sure if we ask, we'll be told, we told them. No. Year in, year out, discussions of this sort are had, promises are made, paper is signed with certain agreements are not met. Why? And long before COVID, you cannot say that the counties were not receiving their fair allocation of what was required. Indeed, there were delays. But why is it then that some counties had a propensity to have more strikes, more industrial action when it comes to the health workers than others? Kisumu has been in the limelight for the longest time when it comes to health workers going on strike. And they always list and lay very, very clearly in the open what their complaints are about. It is clear. So now the solution to people who are on strike is you sack them. This has been tried before. And not last year, not the year before. This has been tried 20 years ago. This has been tried even before. It has been tried. And at the end of the day, what you're doing is you are sending a message to the very same people who you think you're going to employ instead of these people. This is how we'll treat you when we disagree.
But I say this is how employers and unions behave. So employers will threaten you with a sack, and this happens globally. Unions will threaten you with downing their tools and withdrawing goodwill. And this is what happens globally. So, I mean, it's a ping-pong game here.
It's a nonsensical game.
And I sometimes listening to what Governor Ongwae was telling us yesterday, and then listening to Peterson of the Clinical Officers Union, listening to Dr. Machanda, who we've spoken to many times, of the medical union, listening to the nurses unions, and all the other unions. We've even talked to the Pilots Association and the others. So you can tell that there's a point they're raising, and there's a point of negotiation that they have determined that this is going to be our tool for negotiation. There's a point that the employer then also looks at and decides, I'm going to ignore, I have not heard this or the other, I'm going to focus on this is the issue, and this is where I do not agree with this whole action that you're taking. So they keep going back and forth, back and forth. None of them is mad. The same way we're saying that it's not that doctors are crazy to wake up one morning and down their tools. It's not that the governor is crazy to wake up one morning and decide, you know what, guys, go home. The governor clearly understands that when health is not working, when people are going to hospital and they don't find doctors or nurses, that backlash comes back to me. People know I am the one who has done this, and I am likely have the higher likelihood of losing here because I need to be elected. This doctor knows that they have longer terms and they can even go to court and they can take this to court. As a governor, I will not go to court and say, you know what, the people should have elected me. They should have listened to my point why I did not provide healthcare services when they elected me in the first term. The governor has no such reprieve. So the governor also is not being stupid in their head. It's not that they're not calculating their risks. They know the risk that is there. And when they're looking at it, they're saying,
what they're doing, in my opinion, Eric, is an even greater risk for them. Because they're following a time-honored tradition that when these people, and I'm paraphrase, and listen to what I'm saying, when they joke with you, use a hammer. Don't accommodate this nonsense that they're bringing. Look, you've listened to them. They seem to have this view that this is the path that they must follow. Now, they must be taught once and for all that that path is not going to bring any benefit to them. And that the only path that is available that will be of use to them is the one which you are telling them. Eric, if it was true that this is something that is universal in our counties, why then is it that every time you ask the question, do we have these same problems everywhere in the country? That is one question that you ask anyone in leadership, then they go around it. They don't answer it directly. Some counties don't have these issues. How is it that they don't have the issues? And it's the same healthcare workers who have the same problems, same issues. How is it then that some counties have more industrial action than others? How? Why? Is it that they are the unfortunate ones who happen to have health workers who are very militant and who like to raise issues when there's nothing to raise? Why? Look, there will always be issues when it comes to the welfare of workers, and that's why unions were formed in the first place. But even as we acknowledge this, there has to be a rethink in the way these matters are handled. Not to wait until they get to a head and then all manner of draconian decisions have to be made in an attempt to sort out the issue. The issue is not going to be sorted out this way. No.
Definitely not the way to go right now.
It won't be.
you don't get rid of them, because if anything you're doing, that you're just brewing this hostility is getting a lot worse. You're brewing hostility, you're fermenting dissent. They're not going to go back just because you've said, or they're not going to come back on their terms just because you've said that they're going to lose their jobs. If anything, you're making an already bad situation worse by the way in which you're going about this. This is not the way.
And these new people you're employing, which country are they coming from? Kenya.
Kenya, here.
You think they can't see what's happening to them? What sort of people, what sort of mindset do you think these new so-called employees are going to have? And they've seen what you've done.
They've seen how you've treated their predecessors.
They've seen.
They see the modus operandi.
Yes.
They've seen how things work. Do you really think that they're going to come into the job then believing that there will be some kind of eureka moment and things will change suddenly because there are new people there? They're coming into a system that's already existent.
Why do you think the doctors and pharmacists and why do you think they decided to have their own union? They didn't always have a union. Why do you think they decided to have a union? Because they realized if we are going to negotiate for things that will make our lives better, we need one voice. And that usually works well when you have a union. Because then you have a body that represents everyone, and when they speak the language of everyone, as opposed to this piecemeal negotiation where someone is negotiating with one person, the other person doesn't quite know what is being said. And as we say, here we are. This, as is the case with such things, will not end well. Because at some point they'll say they've arrived at an agreement and people have to sign new contracts in order to be employed so they can start all over again. It is a tiresome game.
Very, very.
And I really wonder whether it is necessary. Must this dance be the dance that people have all the time when you have these issues? Because you know something, Eric, this is not a situation that is COVID-driven. We've had this same situation playing out even before there was COVID. Before all these constraints we keep talking about, the economy is constrained because of COVID and what, we've had the same situation before any of that happened. So how is it then that we are now saying that because of COVID, suddenly the same thing that has happened before, prior to COVID being an issue, how then do we think that there's going to be a solution? I think positions were long taken in these matters, and what we're seeing are the positions clashing and playing out.
Yeah, indeed. Let's see if we can we have some technical issues this morning, but either way, we're going to try and have this conversation with Dr. Chibanzi Machanda, who is the Secretary General of the KMPDU. Doc, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm on the line, Eric. I
Good.
hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. In a way or the other way, at least we can hear you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Paul Esana, man, you are jobless.
Happy New Year to you guys. I think we last spoke last year in 2020.
Oh, yeah, we forgot about that bit.
Basically, that's the situation.
Where we need to tell him Happy New Year despite all the challenges.
Yes, indeed. Happy New Year. Yes. New Year greetings. Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Happy New Year, Dr.
Thank you very much. I think, yes, that's the situation, but I'm not jobless because that process is illegal. So I'm not jobless. I still have my job.
All right. So just take us through what led to yesterday's action by the county government of Mombasa. This is not about the strike that the KMPDU called mid-December, is it?
Yeah, so just to clarify this, that the Mombasa situation is a situation that had begun in July, August. There was a conciliation process by the Ministry of Labour in July and August. That conciliation process failed, and there was a certificate of disagreement issued, which resulted now in the coast branch of KMPDU undertaking industrial action in the month of August, and they signed a return to work formula on 2nd of October 2020. That return to work formula had several issues, more so now as a collective bargaining agreement, which is a legally binding document, one on promotions, and then two, one of the second issue that has been a problem has been the issue of non-remittance of third-party deductions and statutory deductions, that is NHIF, KRA, PAYE, bank loans and any insurance premiums. And thirdly, the issue of delayed and persistent delayed of payment of salaries. So even as we speak, Mombasa County is yet to pay salaries for the month of December. So in December, on December 2nd, there was a strike notice issued for non-implementation of the return to work formula. And because this implementation was not done and the county decided to ignore that strike notice, then what resulted was in industrial action that began on 7th of December, separate from the nationwide strike that began on 21st of December. So even as we went on strike on 21st of December, there was an issue in Mombasa that was pending. At that time, doctors had received letters and messages from their banks that their accounts were frozen, they could not access their monies. So that is the matter that led to this industrial action. Throughout that time, they started sending letters of warning letters and dismissal letters. And we wrote back because they had gone to court and the court had ordered that they implement the return to work formula. So they disregarded the court order and now decided that they're going to go on a path of distraction. And path of distraction is to dismiss the doctors.
Okay, now this is, quite an unfortunate turn of events then, because you get into a point where the employer has decided you guys went on strike, you downed your tools, you stopped offering your services. The reason why the employee stopped offering services is because they were feeling that, their money was not being remitted. It's like what CT was saying. It's like a dance.
And that's the saddest thing about the situation in our country, more so in the health sector, because what you're seeing is what I call brinkmanship. I've been here before and I told you there's a lot of arrogance by our governors and our leaders in the counties, where they do not want to resolve the issues, do not want to focus on the issues. They've decided that now it's going to be an act where if you speak, then if you raise grievances, then we will not address, but we will show you that we are the ones in power. And that, to be honest, is the highest act of impunity we can see, to a point that even court orders are being disregarded. The county government of Laikipia has an order by the courts to reinstate the doctors in Laikipia, but the governor has remained adamant. The same issues we've seen in Kirinyaga, we've seen in Migori, we've seen in Kisumu yesterday, where nurses were also fired. So it's a position taken by the Council of Governors that going forward, they will not tolerate any issues that are raised, but rather they will show, or rather they will teach us a lesson by firing healthcare workers. Yeah.
So what lesson is this, Dr. Machanda? What lesson is this? Is there a lesson that has been learned then between this firing that took place yesterday and this morning? Is there a lesson that has been learned?
Well, for us, there's no lesson learned because, when the issues are genuine, when doctors don't have access to their monies, when doctors don't have access to treatment because you've not paid the remittances for 6 months. I'm part of that county. I work in that county, and I can tell you my NHIF records indicate clearly that the last contribution was in July. But if you look at my pay slips from July up until November, the deduction was made. So where is the money? Where is the money?
So there's something I heard you say. I suspect I misheard you, but just explain it so that it can be clearer. You said that medical workers found that their accounts had been frozen.
Yes.
Please elaborate on this circumstance, if I heard you right. Is it true that they were frozen? What are the circumstances that led to the freezing of these accounts?
Okay. So you have an instance where a doctor has taken a loan, and every month maybe there's an amount that is being paid. Let's just say 20,000. So you go for 3 months. Now we are in the 6th month. You go for 3 months, and the bank realizes that the loan they are supposed to recoup from your salary is not being remitted. But if you look at your pay slip, the pay slip indicates clearly that you've been paid your net, but the deductions have been made. And so what banks decided, because they tried to follow up this issue with the county government of Mombasa, and I'm saying it with so much confidence, and were not getting the monies paid to them. So they now turned and started dealing directly with the person, because the contract between the loan, during the loan application, is between the owner of the account and the bank. So bank wrote letters and wrote messages to our doctors that your loan is in default for the last 6 months, for the last 3 months. We are trying to recover our loan. So in recovering the loan, whatever amount is in your account is recouped. And then the account is frozen to an extent that any monies that come in cannot be used. Just yesterday, the same issue is happening in Embu County, where one of my officials is affected directly. Salary paid on Monday this week, and he goes to try and make a payment via the card, only to realize that the account has no money, zero, and the account is not able to function because the loans have not been remitted to the bank. So the bank recoups everything.
My goodness. Okay. Yesterday, you said, after this happened, yesterday you said that what has happened essentially is endangering Kenyans even further because the strain that will now be put on the health sector with the firing across the country of health workers, of doctors, of nurses, puts a further strain on the health sector. Now, there's that. Then there's also these individuals, we're now looking at about 1,000 individuals as of yesterday who have lost their jobs, or rather about 600 who've lost their jobs, and then the threat of others who just might. What would the solution be, Daktari? Because now we have people who are out of a job. They're hiring new people who are entering into a system which, according to everybody else, is already tainted. What are we doing? It seems like we're getting deeper and deeper into this hole.
So first is to say that the leadership of the county governments is failing us. And let's just say it for sure that the government now has, the national government now has to wake up and take charge. Because if you look at the constitution in terms of the health function, there is a provision for transfer of function back to the national government at some point, because this mess is going to go on. And the reality is that Kenyans voted leaders so that they get services. And we are all Kenyans here. So when leaders decide they don't want to offer services to Kenyans and then put the blame on doctors, nurses, and clinical officers, and yet these doctors, nurses are not being facilitated to perform that role, then there's a failure. And just to be clear is that I think Kenyans need to wake up also and demand for action for their votes. Because if you voted a leader, then that leader must actually ensure that you are getting the services.
Dr. Machanda, let me ask this question, because you are in a position of authority and leadership within the fraternity of the healthcare workers you represent. Are there counties that you could say, specific counties, who have met the needs of their healthcare workers and who do so diligently, and for whom this industrial action may actually be putting them on the spot, and yet they have been doing due diligence to what is required of them?
Okay, I'd like to say this, and I'll separate the issues. That we signed a collective bargaining agreement with all the county governments and the national government. So we do have some counties that have tried and attempted to ensure that there is some good relation with regards to the collective bargaining agreement. That is the position that the Council of Governors is coming from. Now let's get back to the scenario where we were in, and we are still in, on the COVID issue, and the issues of PPEs, on the issues of compensation, on the issues of medical insurance. Those issues, there is no single county that has capacity today to compensate a family of a healthcare worker who has died out of COVID, because of the way the system is structured in terms of the medical provision of insurance through NHIF. And I'm saying this because the president declared and gave a directive on a welfare package for compensation. That one was initiated, and it was rolled out in November by the national government through the NHIF, and that one covers the civil service, which is just the national government employees. So employees in the counties have been left out of this, and that is where we are saying that these specific matters, that on insurance, on compensation, on provision of PPEs, on ensuring that each county has at least a designated healthcare facility for healthcare workers, and the many issues that we've put forth since December, there is no county that actually has that capacity, and they know it. So yes, there are those counties that have worked on the CBA, a separate matter from the current situation in which we required action by all county governments to move in one direction.
Dr. Machanda, what was the issue? Because when the new year broke, it was that there was consensus that had been met between the unions and the government, and everybody was asked to go back to work. So now the question that would be lingering in our minds, and even those who might want to even castigate health workers further, is that why didn't you then come back to work? If there was an agreement that had been reached, strike had essentially been called off, and you were called back to work, why didn't doctors and health workers go back to work?
Even those in Mombasa who had gone on strike for other reasons.
Yeah.
So there were strikes that began before the nationwide strike in some counties, and the issues were county specific. Then there's a nationwide strike. And for us, for the nationwide strike, we resolved the matter. The return to work formula that we signed was a ceasefire document. And by that, I mean that there are issues here. We have 11 issues, yes, but we can focus on these 3. And then we'll come back this week, which was supposed to be this first week of January, to now sit down and thrash out the other issues. But in the meantime, let us have a situation where the doctors are back to work. I know that was just a way of us giving and accepting that they had really shown goodwill at the national government level, some serious goodwill that we could not say, now we'll not undertake this goodwill, we'll continue with the strike. And that was the basis. And the Council of Governors were involved in these discussions. In as much as not all of them were on the table, the discussion and whatever was agreed upon was passed to them. So what we woke up to on Monday and this week, the way this week has begun, has actually gotten us off guard, because we were ready and we were willing to start meeting to thrash out the remaining issues, even as the doctors are offering services. And the next thing is a statement from the Council of Governors, and you've just seen a series of events. The next thing is firing of doctors yesterday, firing of nurses. And so we're actually looking at this, and we're wondering, what is wrong with this Council of Governors now? Because at the end of the day, the solution lies in us sitting down on the table. The solution lies in us agreeing. And the solution lies in them implementing, because the unions do not implement. If unions were the solution today, we are not government. If we were the solution today, we would have implemented these things and you'll not even be seeing strikes.
Okay, I just want to concentrate on the issue of Mombasa. So it's about remittance, it's about deductions, it's about salary. It's a basic direct dispute between the Mombasa doctors and the Mombasa county, the employer. Has there been any attempt at all to resolve this issue, or even trying to understand why is it that the county was not remitting this money? Because if they've paid you the salary and then they've actually indicated that they deducted you this money and they have not sent the money to the bank, why was that? Do you have any inclination? I mean, you sit there, you discuss these things, you have ways of talking to people, senior people in the Department of Health. Why exactly is it that they were not remitting this money?
So the issue in Mombasa County is very persistent. It has been so for the last 5 years. It's been an issue that we have pursued as a union in and out. There's a 300-page document that the branch secretary has in custody that has the full history of all these matters that we've always tried to address. But even more so is that being the Secretary General at the national level, I normally let the branch secretary handle this matter. But on 31st and beginning of this week on Monday, I took it upon myself and I called the county public service board, I called the county secretary and told them, this line you're taking is not going to give you a solution. Can you organize a meeting where we'll sit and discuss these issues? And I was told, that was on Monday evening, that we'll get back to you. Tuesday, they had their own internal meeting and even had one of the doctors, the administrator of the facility, Coast General, call the senior specialists and threaten them with sacking. And then yesterday we wake up to see that the sackings have actually been implemented. So essentially, the union has goodwill. The union is willing to engage, and we are willing to engage. We engaged the senator of Mombasa yesterday in the morning, and he also took it upon himself that he was going to make sure that the issue is resolved. So if it's an issue of us going to discuss, we will go and discuss. But at the end of the day, the county has to implement the matters that are agreed. Because if they don't implement, they are not solving the problem.
It's a very unfortunate thing here because at the end of the day, the people who pay taxes, the people who vote for these governments, are the ones who are seeking healthcare services and they're not receiving them because there are no doctors in hospitals. Because, 85 doctors have been fired because there are very many other doctors who are not getting their issues addressed. Let's hope that there's going to be a quick solution to this particular matter. And thank you very much for speaking to us this morning, Dr. Machanda. Keep us updated on what goes on.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you very much, Eric and Tim. Always a pleasure.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. And we hope that you'll have a happy new year sometime soon.
Well, we are waiting to see. We hope for that.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good day.
A good day.
This is Kenya's biggest conversation. It's the Situation Room, the plight of doctors, what's happening in Kakamega, in Busia, in Kisumu, in Mombasa. We'll have more conversations on this. In the next hour, let's talk about what's happening in America. Good morning. It's 8 o'clock.
Spice up your life. 102.5 Spice FM, Kisumu.
Okay, so let's look at the state of the roads right now. Where we had seen the most problems this morning was a build-up right around Jogo Road. As you now try to connect towards Landis Road, it's moving very slowly, but not too much of drama just at the moment. There was an accident on the southern bypass early on. That has been moved, so traffic is flowing along just smoothly there. Okay, Uhuru Highway, as you try to get into the CBD, this is coming from the Nyayo Stadium roundabout. That's a bit slow, but it's not too bad. It looks like things are not too bad in the mornings. In the afternoons, though, that's a totally different story. The police are on the Utawala bypass this morning, and that's the eastern one. And they're slowing things down a little bit. I guess they're checking for conformity on the roads. Hope that will not slow down traffic too much. All right, so it doesn't look like too crazy anywhere. No bumper-to-bumper action just yet, except around the Pangani Tunnel on Thika Road. Okay, so let's keep an eye on that. Let us know if you're stuck anywhere. Spice FMKE, that's how you can get to us on Twitter. Text 40127.
This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your
Very
day.
good morning to you. 2.5 minutes after 8, this is Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room, broadcasting from Nairobi to Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, Eldoret, Nyeri, Malindi, worldwide on www.spicefm.co.ke, and we live stream the show as well on our social media handles. Spice FM KE, we are on Twitter, we are on Facebook, we are on YouTube. We are not like Donald Trump, who is no longer on Twitter, who is no longer on Facebook, who is no longer on Instagram, because the owners of those platforms, that is Twitter and Facebook, have decided, wait, you have violated so many of our regulations that we're basically suspending you. So, for example, Twitter has suspended him for 24 hours, same thing as Facebook, and even saying, okay, and if he continues, we could permanently ban him from ever being a member of this platform. So, Donald Trump does not have a platform now. So no media is covering him. No, he doesn't have a Twitter Twitter platform where he could rant and talk about whatever is happening in the Senate and talking to his supporters who have congregated in Washington and telling them what to do. So There's those who are saying now he's being found somewhere on some Amazon platforms where, you know, you go and do reviews and he's commenting in the reviews. Can even go to TripAdvisor and find a location and start saying, you know what's happening in America? This is Trump. So they have basically just, you know, locked him out of the platforms. But at the same time, it's still happening in the houses of Congress. Anyway, let's first of all do the proverb, and then we now get into the American conversation properly.
The archer loves the arrow that flies as much as he loves the bow that remains.
Yes. The archer that loves the
arrow that flies
Right.
as much as the bow that remains.
Okay. So America. So this thing that the senators and reps are doing, what is that?
Should we say, broadly speaking,
right,
democracy at work? Because their brand of democracy allows for the things that we are seeing. See, there's this concept of individual rights.
Right.
And this is something that I'm finding interesting, because what Donald Trump seems to have done is he has pushed some of these matters to limits that we have not seen before. He has brought about debates that had never been heard of before in America and the rest of the world. The things that we have heard or seen in America, if you talk about countries that consider them to be democratic, my friend, you would not even do a fraction of the things that have been done. But, again, in the name of democracy, in the name of the Constitution, in the name of people being given the liberty and the ground and the leeway to actually put this into action, this is what we are seeing. Yes, it's playing out. And it's playing out in the public domain because what the President of America has done is his own personal brand of what a president should be is also playing out for us to see. His personal brand of how he understands his position as president and how he understands his rights as is also being played out. So we are seeing all this playing out in the public domain, and it's puzzling because it's not what we're used to seeing.
Right. Just to bring the issue into perspective, so Americans went to the vote last year, and they participated in that, and each state then declares its results.
Yes.
And then each state then gets the electors who, a couple of days later in December, the electors in the electoral college cast their vote for the person who would then become the president, depending on how the person fared in their state. So by the time we were getting to mid-December, when the electors had done their job, it was clear that Joe Biden had basically taken the vote, all right, in the number of electoral college votes that he had received compared to what Donald Trump had received. He had passed the 270 halfway mark. He was already way past 300, okay? So what then is supposed to happen is that yesterday is a date when a joint session of Congress, this is the lower house of representatives and the Senate, come together, and then they open the ballots from each state and say, so alphabetically, Arizona, this is what the electors have said, and the votes go to Donald Trump or they go to Joe Biden. If there's an objection, prior to this, senators or reps would have declare that we have an objection to this. An objection is then done at that point, and the sessions break, and you go in and you start now discussing this particular objection. And then you come back and go to the next one until you finish all of them and all objections, and then you wait for the 20th when the new president is sworn in. Interesting bit here is that the vice president is the president of the Senate. He's now there for the one who is overseeing this whole process of himself getting out of office in a particular case. This has happened before.
It isn't the first time it has happened.
Nixon did that. The climate change man.
Al Gore
did that. That name just went. Did that. So now we are seeing Mike Pence doing the same. Interestingly, this time, though, is the number of people who are supporters of Donald Trump, who voted for Donald Trump, who believe what has been said by Donald Trump, and some of his supporters who are in positions of leadership, including in the Senate and in the House of Representatives, who have turned up at Washington and were basically protesting and marching around Washington. And at some point, they decided, you know what, hii bunge hii tutaingia. So they went, and the whole session had to be interrupted until security had to come in and remove them. And now the sessions are continuing. This whole game and this whole circus is basically just casting an entire different kind of spotlight on the United States of America. They've worked for so many years, centuries, working on building a democracy, building and having traditions that are observed, having some mode of decorum that is then followed in how people will behave, and then getting to a certain point where they are all now saying, this is not our tradition. This is not what our law says. This is not how we do things. This is not how we do things.
But
they are all in agreement that no one is breaking the law.
Talk about tradition and ask yourself, okay, when you talk about presidents of the USA, many of them have had a political career.
Yes.
Even the one unlikely one, who was Ronald Reagan, had been a governor.
Yep.
Trump was unusual in that he was a civilian. He was a business person.
Yeah.
What was his political role prior to being president?
Zero.
Precisely. Now, there are those who also argue that that political journey enables you to understand, well, how government works, how political systems work. But straight from civilian...
And immerses you into that system where there's some certain order.
You understand how this thing works. You understand how things move. But you take someone directly from public life, private life, TV life, commerce, all that, and you bring them direct to the presidency.
Fish out of water.
Precisely. Well, flying fish tend to be out of water, but they eventually go back into water.
In.
Yes. But you can see...
fish climbing a tree.
This is actually... And there are fish that can climb trees, just so that you understand it. Yes, they are. In the Amazon, there are fish that actually climb trees. Now, here...
They go up there, they bask, and then they go back into the water. Okay.
What would be unusual fish that talk? Now, a language that we can associate as to being talk discussion.
Right.
But here we have this situation, and it's worthy of a discussion and study.
Sure.
It's unusual, and it has brought very unusual circumstances. Extremely unusual circumstances.
What is it that Donald Trump is, for example, expecting or hoping to do? He has refused to concede. The cases have gone to court. They have been thrown out. None of the cases that he took to court has stuck. None of the judges have actually agreed with him. Well, none of the courts have agreed with him. Some judges have voted in favor of the cases that have been brought. But basically, you've lost the vote.
Everywhere.
It's clear to you yourself that you have lost.
In courts, and here you are, you're still sitting and saying, no, I am not going to accept. This is our democracy which is being desecrated.
I asked the question, somebody who has never been in the political system, what system has he been in?
All right, but as you ask that, remember at the same time, there are the senators, for example, in the Senate, there are those in the Congress, basically the joint Congress, who agree that there needs to be questions asked.
I don't think there's anybody who questions that.
And they're experienced. And they're coming up and saying, for example, I have signed this objection. Why are they signing the objection?
Because they feel that the democratic right allows them. Now, you see, there's a nuisance factor to all these things.
Okay.
The fact that I feel I should ask doesn't mean that what I'm saying makes sense. Yes, I think and I believe it is my right to exercise this particular feeling that I have. That's how far rights go. But remember, the interesting political consequences when you talk about the two parties, Republican and Democrats, it's interesting because people who are in the parties that took Trump to the presidency, it's there that you're seeing serious shifts.
Yep.
You're seeing serious movements.
I think you're also seeing the vocalization of this.
Yes, which wasn't there before.
Previously, even if there was an emotion or there was a feeling that would swing them in the opposite direction, in this case right, or in this case left, now it's being vocalized. It's being shared publicly and it's coming out into the open that, all right, this usually conservative, right-wing way of doing things is now moving a little bit left and then is actually opening it up and bringing it out for people to hear that this is what they actually think and what they believe.
And what seems to be also playing out here is that you get the impression that the people who are the backbone of this particular party, they are now experiencing a certain sense of embarrassment. It's like, what on earth is this that is happening? It's not just us to our party.
Yep.
What image is our party beginning to get? And the Democrats are reaping from it.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay, so happened in Georgia. So let's bring in some two people to help us have this conversation. We'll have Professor Paul Zeleza. He's the Vice Chancellor of USIU Africa. Professor Cassandra Vini, who's the Professor and Chair of the Department of International Relations at USIU Africa. Good morning, professors, and thank you very much for joining us today again.
Good morning. It's lovely to join you again today.
Good morning. Thank you.
Well, karibuni sana. Welcome to the Situation Room. A lot of drama unfolding overnight in the USA, Prof. Zeleza.
Yes, absolutely. Fascinating. I spent much of the evening watching this almost unbelievable attack on the U.S. Capitol. From the mobs mobilized by Trump that still believe that the election was not won by President-elect Biden. This, I think, is, of course, at one level it's shocking, but at another level it's not surprising at all. I think it's a fitting end to the Trump era, the Trump presidency, the chaos, the lies, the misinformation, the agitation, the polarization, the partisanship. All those things have come to play, and it's not accidental that they did that on the day in which the Congress was supposed to formally certify the results of the election.
And as we see this, Professor Vini, as well, as you come in with your own views of what you've seen happening overnight in America. So there are those who signed their objections to this. There are those who have actually been speaking throughout in every objection, coming up to say yes, we have a tradition, and there's a reason why the founders put these clauses into the law so that we can come up here. We are the ones who are representing the people. We shall represent the people who are raising their objections, and we shall hear one another in in a civilized manner. We shall hear one another. We shall talk about the objections that are being raised. What do you make of that? Isn't that just a show of the kind of good tradition and good systems that have been put in place? Professor Vini.
Okay. I think that they were put in place at a time that was relevant. I think they're still relevant. What I think is different this time around is that for the first time in memory, and I'm not young, that this was actually televised. And again, I think that with 24-hour news, with tweets, with social media, even what we saw yesterday, we're in a situation where not only can everybody in the United States see it, but everybody across the world can see it. Ordinarily, I don't ever remember hearing about it, reading about it, or certainly not seeing it on TV. This is just a different time with a different president and a different set of Republicans.
Professor Vini, when we had a talk last time, we talked about the system and perhaps there were cracks in it from a very long time ago. And you alluded to the fact that it's the democracy that has been practiced in the United States, or that has been practiced over the last, odd 50 years or so, is unsettling to very many people, different communities. Are we not seeing a direct outplay of that right now? That there are things that people have been uncomfortable with for the longest time, and now is when it's being brought out into the open?
I absolutely positively agree. And I jotted down a couple of notes. One thing that may not seem like it's that important, but I think it is. If you look at the people who were storming the Capitol or walking around the Capitol building, if you look at the two flags that they were waving around, one was an American flag and the other a Confederate flag. Flags are symbols. Flags are political symbols. Social symbols. They can even be economic symbols, religious symbols, whatever you want to call it. Within the context of the United States, these are two powerful symbols that can be positive, that can be negative. And in my view, you're absolutely right. What that American flag to me symbolized yesterday, if you looked at the people who were waving them. They looked like they were of a particular age set, and they appeared to me, again, I wasn't down there, I'm just going by what I saw on the news, disproportionately white males within a certain age bracket. Were they walking around in suits and ties? No, they weren't. Could they be professionals? I don't know. Could they be educated? I don't know. I'm not going to stereotype in terms of their educational background or their socioeconomic background. But when you have people waving around that American flag, let's start with that one, that to me is symbolizing that these men and women out there are saying, this is our country, this is our capital, this is our democracy, it's ours, it belongs to us and no one else. And that goes back to what I was saying when I was previously here. In the year 2021, to continue to wave around a Confederate flag on Capitol federal ground speaks volumes. The war is over. It's been over. You lost it. And it's like it's symbolizing, we want to go back to how it was, white men in privilege, white men in power, and all of you people who are trying to get that power away from us, we're going to knock you down some kind of way.
Professor, when you look at the changes that we clearly are witnessing, there's a debate that you alluded to the last time we were together on radio, that perhaps the way Americans have handled their politics, their elections, their democracy, perhaps it is time that they gave it a review and relooked at the whole thing. Now, if that were true and they were to look at it, in your view, what would they be looking at and what would they perhaps need to change?
Okay, let's just zero in on, and Professor Zalaza can come in as well. Let's just zero in on what we're talking about now. As far as I'm concerned, we're not talking about the whole political system. We're talking about the executive branch. We're talking about the institution of the presidency. I don't think we're necessarily talking about the whole system because it's a federal system. States have their powers. Local governments have their powers. The three branches have their powers. So to me, we're looking at one branch of the federal government. And within the context of this election and Trump and all of that, some people have been saying over and over again, and I think they're right. We need to look at not only the electoral college. Let's just back up a little bit. And Professor Zalaza, if I'm saying what you were going to say, forgive me, that we have a situation where the presidential election, that whole campaign thing, it's too long. You don't need to spend that much time campaigning. It's too well funded, if you will. So much money goes into it. And all of that money is going to go to only two parties. So the party system itself needs to be looked at. You have two parties, that's it. There is no place for a third party. You have a winner take all. As soon as the president gets to that campaign first candidate gets to the 270, that's it. There is no runner up. And so I think we need to look at a couple of things. The length of the campaigning, the amount of money that goes into it, the electoral college is archaic and outdated and needs to be done away with. Absolutely. Our party system perhaps needs to be opened up so more voices and views and whatnot actually get to be represented.
Professor Zalaza, you can come in. What do you think needs to be reviewed in this?
Yes, I agree with Professor Vini. I think there are a number of things that need to be looked at, and certainly what she said about the electoral college, it's outdated, not suitable for the 21st century, for a democratic country in which 565 electors, sit in a room and do whatever they do, and then you go through this whole process in which then Congress is going to simply validate what is already known. So the electoral college system, I think, has to go. Accompanying these, of course, issues that we discussed last time, the gerrymandering of the electoral system, voter suppression, the composition of the Senate, all of which leads to minority government. Republican presidents have not won the popular vote in more than 30 years. And Republican senators represent a minority of American voters. And yet, they've been, of course, until yesterday, in charge of the Senate, at least for the last several years. So in other words, the U.S. system favors minority rule by the Republicans. The gap between the election and the transfer of power, as Professor Vini said, also should be shortened. This system was made during a time when the United States was an agrarian society, in which to move from one place to another took you, days, if not weeks. Now, people can fly from California to Washington in a few hours. So these systems that were designed for a pre-industrial society need to go, because we are not even, in the case of the US, it's not even just an industrial society, it's even post-industrial, in which communication and all that are much more robust than used to be the case. And the issue of funding.
Did it take a man like Trump to show the cracks that really exist in the United States system? Did it take him to do that?
Yeah, let's put it this way. A lot of Americans, certainly Americans who have been at the receiving end of American politics, have always known that the system in the United States is dysfunctional. What has happened is that Trump has exposed the dysfunctionality of that system to the rest of the country, to the rest of the population that turned a blind eye to the dysfunctionality of that system, because they've always been beneficiaries. And certainly, he has exposed the dysfunctionalities to the rest of the world. So people like me and Professor Bini, as academics, as Black people in the United States, nothing that has happened in the last few years since Trump came to power, and certainly nothing that has happened since the election, is a surprise, because we knew how dysfunctional this system is. But now the rest of the population in the country, as well as the rest of the world, has been shown how dysfunctional it is. So Trump has actually provided a historic service to the country, namely exposing its dysfunctions and its deformities, so that if the country is to go to move forward, it has to deal with those things. And it has barely survived the crisis that was brought about by Trump and his acolytes in the Republican Party.
But as you observe what's been happening, especially now with the other leaders, not just Trump, but the other leaders in the political space in America, do you see like they are internalizing this as a problem that has been exposed by Trump and that therefore needs a conversation to happen? Or are they, all of them in unison, just feeling, let's just get rid of Trump so we can go back to what was a very nice and functional system? Do you think there really is a feeling of let's review and change?
I think there is an awakening among certain elements of the Republican establishment. You recall recently there were 10 former defense secretaries issued a statement saying this is unbecoming for our country. And yesterday or the day before, 170 corporate executives said this is unacceptable. And these are people who have been supporting the Republican Party. So there is a reckoning in some circles. There is a reckoning in some circles. However, you have to bear in mind that there are a lot of forces in the United States among Trump supporters who, of course, are still wedded to the narrative of the country being, of course, more belonging to them than to others. So the polarization will not necessarily disappear because of this. However, there will be greater reckoning, and they need to begin reforming the system, because Trump failed because he's incompetent, he's undisciplined, and frankly, he's a buffoon. The danger for the United States is getting a much smarter, more strategic version of a future Trump, who will succeed in destroying the remnants of that democratic system. So there is need, I think, for bipartisan efforts to make reforms that will safeguard the system. The guardrails of democracy have held, but barely during this crisis.
I'd like us to take a break at this point. Stay on the line, Professor. So we have Professor Paul Zeleza. He's the Vice Chancellor of the USIU Africa. Professor Cassandra Vini, she is the Chair of the Department of International Relations, also from USIU Africa. We are looking at what's happening in America. This is what we're calling it. The lessons that we can learn from Trump's clear failed coup attempt in America. So when we come back, we'll be asking the professors what lessons then we can learn from this. What lessons can the rest of the world learn from this? Other parts of the globe that are practicing this model of democracy. What is it that we can take from this going forward? This is Kenya's biggest conversation. It's the Situation Room. It's now 29 minutes after 8 o'clock. Let's see weather and traffic, and then we'll be back shortly. Keep it right here. Good morning.
Maritime Tips brought to you by Kenya Maritime Authority. Precautions for boat owners, crew and passengers. Keep a distance of 2 meters between each other. Put on your masks. Sanitize your hands. Practice coughing and sneezing etiquette. Disinfect life jackets regularly. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects and surfaces on board the boats and vessels, such as steering wheel, safety and guardrails, and seats. Provide disposal bins with lids on board boats and vessels. Limit passenger capacity to 50%. Do not overload your vessel. Observe government curfew times. Stay home if you have flu-like symptoms. Stay safe. Stop spread of coronavirus. Kenya Maritime Authority for safe and efficient water transport.
All right, the sun is high in the sky in Nairobi, 17 degrees. We'll see highs of 27 today and then coming down to lows of 16. Clear conditions in Nakuru at 13, highs of 27 and lows of 13. Partly cloudy conditions in Nyeri at 12, highs of 26 and lows of 10. We're looking at 10 in Eldoret as well. Clear conditions going to highs of 25. The high will be 28 in Kisumu. It's currently 20. Partly cloudy conditions in Kakamega at 13, going to highs of a warm 31. 32 will be the high in Mombasa. Currently partly cloudy conditions at 24. Partly cloudy also in Malindi at 13. It's pretty chilly for Malindi. Highs of 30. And mostly clear conditions in Kampala at 20. Highs of 27, lows of 18. We're looking at Dar es Salaam where the rain continues to come down in some parts. Highs of 32 and highs of 21 in Johannesburg today where it's still raining at 17. Light rain also in Lagos at 26. Highs of 32 and lows of 25. And finally for now in Kinshasa, rain showers at 24 with highs of 30.
Sugar and spice and everything nice, just the way you like it.
The Spice Drive.
Did you have a great day? I hope you did. I intend to make it better from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. I'm going to be taking you home nice and chill. Everyone is welcome aboard. The hashtag is Spice Drive and, of course, Spice FMKE on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
The Spice Drive with Monique. The official soundtrack of getting you where you need to be.
Okay.
Traffic.
So the Eastern Bypass seems to be opening up just a little bit. The police seem to have been done with their morning runs. So that's not causing too much traffic at the moment as it was a few minutes ago. Landis Road is seeming to clear up as you try to get into the CBD today. Also coming out of Westlands, that's looking much better now. You can get in and out without too much of an issue. Getting into the CBD from Tomboya Street is going to slow you down some. The construction continues there. So unless you're a public service vehicle, you can use Forest Road. Wangari Maathai Road, then to get into the CBD. Okay? Construction still continues on Mombasa Road, so there's certain parts where you're going to get clogged up just a little bit. But there you have to bear with the folks until they're done with that. Other than that, traffic doesn't look too terrible this morning. I think it's quite good. Spice FMKE, not to forget. That's how you can get in touch with us and let us know what you see in case you get stuck or you find a great route that nobody knows about. Let us know that. Text us as well. 40127.
Are you ready? Okay.
Spice FM. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice
At
FM.
27 minutes to 9 o'clock, we continue the conversation right here in the Situation Room. CT Muga Nduoko Eric Latif, and joining us on the line is Professors Paul Zeleza, Vice Chancellor, USIU Africa, and Professor Cassandra Vini, Chair of the Department of International Relations, USIU Africa. We are talking about what we are witnessing happening in America. So overnight, the Joint Congress was sitting basically just to verify the votes from the Electoral College, and then if there are any objections, then they are discussed. And then we also saw there were demonstrators, protesters who had poured into the streets of Washington, and at some point they took over the Capitol building and then were dispersed, and that is still going on in terms of the conversations in Congress, in the Capitol. It raises very many issues. Donald Trump has refused to concede this election. Donald Trump has now even been suspended from Facebook and Twitter, so he's not able to run. We really can't tell what's going on in Donald Trump's mind right now because he has no avenue to speak to the people. What are the lessons that then we can take out of this? Professor Weissman on Twitter says, we have to come up with a new system of governance. According to him, democracy, communism, socialism, and all those others have failed, and we need a new style of governance, even if it means starting from scratch. Professor Vini, what would you tell Weissman?
I would tell white man that every political system, every regime has issues, has problems. I still firmly believe that the United States can achieve a democracy. I don't think it's a full democracy. I don't know if we'll ever get to a full democracy. I would tell white man that, because the original question was about lessons, so I'm going to address that briefly. The lessons that come to mind from yesterday and this whole thing is that the United States needs to look at itself and ask itself, does it have a political culture? Is that political culture working for most people? I think that political culture has to be evaluated or re-evaluated, because political culture is what? Values, attitudes, orientations toward the political system. And if the consensus, the majority of the people feel and come up with some idea that you need to throw the baby out with the bathwater, that's fine. But you just don't do that overnight. Lessons that can be learned, I think, is that every vote counts. People have power. People can't sit down and think that somebody's going to do it for them, that we are in the position right now where we need to build some serious coalition. And I think that the genie is out of the bottle, and we probably don't want to get the genie back in. This is the time to sit down and think and discuss about lessons learned and how to move forward. So no, I don't think the democracy, whatever it is, I don't think it's a full democracy, needs to be abandoned, needs to be thrown out. But it clearly needs to be evaluated on a number of fronts.
If you, I'm asking this question of the two of you, professors. If I, as a layman, look at the influence that America has had on the entire world, and I look at what is happening now, very broadly speaking, and of course theoretically speaking, would you say that, one, that what America had represented the existence of a civilization that I would like to call the American civilization? If you look at the influences they've had from the foods they eat, the expressions, everything about it. And if you were to take that view, would you then say that this is a civilization in decline?
Well, I will let Professor Vina address that before I do.
Okay. The first time I was on the program, I tried to make it clear that what we had been fed, the whole world, not just Americans, about the exceptionalism, the democracy, the liberty, and all of that, clearly is not true. And again, going back to what Professor Zeleza said, those of us who have been on the receiving end of injustice, of racism and inequality, we know that. And I said the other time, I find it very interesting that those things, we are subjected to those things, but the people who are doing those things somehow or another are clueless. So If you look at the United States, again, I hate to repeat myself, from day one, it was not a democracy. It should not have been looked at as something that was wonderful and good, because you don't start a country with slavery codified into the Constitution. I also said last time, all you have to do is look at how certain people gain their citizenship. If you are born there or you come there and you become naturalized, a naturalized citizen, an amendment should not be added to the Constitution. I've said that. Congress should not pass laws to give you citizenship. Those are clues. Those are like breadcrumbs. We should not currently still have a Voting Rights Act that we vote on. It should be like, if you're a citizen and you meet these criteria, then you should be able to vote. So why the world thinks it's like that, Africans in particular, people of African descent in particular, I don't want to say anything that sounds frivolous, but history is important. It's important for us to know history. And when you know just a little bit of the history of the United States, then you ought not think that way, honestly. You really ought not.
Yeah, maybe
looking at systems of government on...
Yeah, Professor Zileza, go ahead.
Yes, I was going to say that I think in terms of some of the lessons we should learn is that for democracy to flourish, the political parties have to agree to the rules of the game. They simply have to be prepared to accept defeat, which of course we have seen. In this case, there is no agreement. And this issue is something that we see not only, of course, in the US. We are seeing this across the continent. When elections come, all these disputes, it means there is no agreement to the rules of the game, and therefore you end up in these continuous squabbles and divisions, and sometimes even descending into civil strife. Secondly, the role of the traditional media and social media in what Professor Vini rightly calls in a country's political culture and political socialization is critical for a healthy democracy. We know social media platforms and right-wing radio, media rather, radio, television, newspapers have turned into cesspools of lies, misinformation, and very angry diatribes that stoke division, polarization, and partisanship. As you noted, Twitter has just suspended their account for Mr. Trump, and I think they should have done this much earlier. Social media is now extremely powerful, but I think it needs to be regulated in ways that promote civic engagement rather than division. The other issue that Professor Vini mentioned is the whole question of how elections are financed. For example, the Senate runoff elections in Georgia cost more than $500 million. That's unquestionable. So the issue of how do we finance elections is one that has to be looked at. And finally, I think it's also a question of the kind of political system in terms of the electoral system is something that is important. Again, to stress the point by Professor Vini, voters, first of all, everybody has to have the right to vote. And secondly, their vote has to matter. And the ways in which it matters or doesn't matter depends on the electoral system. A winner-take-all system is not necessarily the best way of ensuring representation for voters. So really looking at these systems, electoral systems, of course there are different ones, plurality systems, majoritarian systems, proportional representational systems, and so on. What is the kind of system that will ensure that the vote of the vast majority of people, in fact, every vote counts?
Okay, so Professor Zeleza, I think also for both of you, as well as you, Professor Vini, is, okay, so you've talked about the fact that you can start off, you can work on the system, you can go into a situation whereby things essentially would be better. Now, there are countries around the world, there are systems around the world who have modeled the operation around the United States operation, starting to see these cracks now that are coming out, vocalized, that are clear for the rest of the world to see. What specific lessons do you think would be then standing in place for them who have modeled that and have said, look, we're going in this way, and now seeing that, hold on a minute, this actually doesn't really work? What lessons lie here for them, whereby the global leader seems now to be having issues? We can start with you, Professor Cassandra.
Again, I think that within the context of the United States, I don't necessarily, and I may be wrong, I don't necessarily think that the whole system is rotten to the core, is not working, etc. I think there is something to say or something to point out in terms of a federal system where powers are divided between the national government and the state government. And of course, we know that those powers aren't quite the way they were or supposed to be because money talks, and the federal government has money and the states have to do X, Y, and Z in order to get that money. I think within the context of the United States, again, I think people need to, in the United States, people need to pay attention to what's going on in their states, what's going on in their communities. I think for other countries, they need to look at what works for them and not just take everything from the United States or take everything from any other country. Because when you look at how the United States was created, from a revolution, from violence, and then you get your independence, but you decide a group of people aren't going to be free, but they're going to be slaves. I don't know who in their right mind would say, this is good, this is wonderful, I want to go ahead and emulate that.
Professor Zeleza.
Yeah, I fundamentally agree that we should stop this habit of assuming that some countries are models. In this case, that some countries are mature democracies and others are infant democracies. The reality is that there are really no mature democracies as such. Democracy is a continuous process. It can be reversed.
Right.
We saw that in the 20th century. Germany, reversed its democracy with the rise of the Nazis. They were actually voted into power. And the dictators that we have in various parts of the world are voted into power during sometimes very clean elections. And later on, use that electoral mandate to subvert the system. In other words, democracy is a continuous process. It's not like something that you go to a shop and say, I've bought democracy, and now I need to just consume it. I don't need to refreshen it. It's every generation, every person must always fight for democracy. It's not a done deal. It can be reversed. And democracy is not something you copy from other people. You also develop your own institutions, your own cultures, your own systems, and your own ways of doing it so that it is meaningful to the community of that political system.
Can I just add this? I may have said it previously.
Yep.
The one important lesson, not just from yesterday, but in the Georgia election, in the election of President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris, people have power. It may not seem like it, but if you have the right to vote, don't sit down, don't sit at home. And people together, building coalitions, working together, they have power. Stacey Abrams in Georgia is a manifestation. The woman is a doer. And as Professor Zeleza said, it's not set in stone. It's a process. But if people sit down and do nothing and think, as he said, you've gone into the shop, you've bought whatever, and that's it, you're mistaken. And no one's going to give up power. No one's going to give you power. You have to fight for it. I don't mean violently, but you have to fight for it. You have to know your rights and stand up for yourself. And every individual has a responsibility. Unless you're okay with what's going on. And you see too many instances where particularly Black people in the United States have said, we're sick and tired. Of what? Being sick and tired.
Indeed. I think even lessons that we are going to have to discuss is what we see from Stacey Abrams and what she's done, turning Georgia around from the first election into the second senatorial runoff. Everything that has happened there and what is being credited to her. Now, if we just look at statements that are coming out of America, just from observing the spectacle that was yesterday that has been overnight, statement by former President George W. Bush, who says that Laura and I are watching the scenes of mayhem unfolding at the seat of our nation's government in disbelief and dismay. It's a sickening and heartbreaking sight. This is how election results are disputed in a banana republic, not our democratic republic. I'm appalled by the reckless behavior of some political leaders since the election and by the lack of respect shown today for our institutions. Now, if you just removed America, and you looked at this as, George W. Bush, president of the U.S., and he's talking about this is how I'm appalled by this. It would be a statement that he'd have sent many, many times after results in very many other countries. Now, does it tell us something about, for example, just looking at, and that's a conversation that I was fronting earlier, looking at what people have decided is their system and letting people let their own system work? No other part of the world is actually writing statements and saying we demand and we like to see the American president step aside, or calling him the African recognized president, Joe Biden, and like we see the Western recognized president. We're not seeing those kind of statements. So isn't it a lesson that also the leadership of these big countries in the world, America and others in Europe, should just take and learn? When people go into an election and there is a system in place, let the people solve their issues. Unless they call you and they tell you, come and help us and establish this particular medium of mediating, let them be.
Yes, I think you've touched on a very important issue, the election monitoring industry.
Right.
Which has become extremely powerful. And it's interesting, it's only, of course, geared towards countries in the global south, specifically, of course, countries in Africa. And part of it is we are ourselves allowed it. We allow these people to come and do the monitoring. I observe a lot of African elections, and you find that, we have, of course, from the regional bodies, the AU, and so on and so forth, and everybody is, sort of anxiously waiting until the EU or the Commonwealth or the Carter Center says something, and then that's true. And half the time, these are people, who were staying in the hotels in the capital city and maybe traveled a little bit to the countryside to observe. And what they say really, frankly, doesn't matter. I'll give you the most recent example of Malawi. I happen to know Malawi very well because I'm from there. The elections conducted last year, all these bodies said they were free and fair. And it was very courageous political activists, human rights activists, and lawyers, and the political parties that lost, working together to challenge those elections. And the EU was like, no, they were free and fair. And the judiciary was very courageous in overturning those elections and ordering new elections. And as part of the new elections, they also said the electoral system has to be different, that it is not simply a majoritarian in terms of you have 134%, in this case, the president 138%, and you have one more than everybody else, you win. He said, no, it has to be 50 plus 1. And guess what? The opposition party won. And in terms of the election monitoring industry, that election, the subsequent election, was funded totally by local resources. There were no external observers. The people themselves took it upon themselves to observe the integrity of those elections, and they were not contested. In other words, we have to take ownership about our own political systems, electoral systems, and in order to do that, as Professor Vini said, we have to be engaged citizens and not allow ourselves to be divided by tribe, by other considerations that are irrelevant. In the end, the political class always work together. It's the ordinary people who suffer, who end up dying during crisis. The political class continue to survive. They shift parties like changing shirts, because for them it's a game. For the population, it should never be a game. The people have to realize they have power.
If you were to take a position and give an opinion on the matters we've discussed, what would you say is the outcome internationally to the influence America has exerted on the rest of the world thus far?
I can say maybe just a couple of things. One is that U.S. influence has been deeply tarnished by the development of the last few years. The election of President Trump, really appended the U.S. global influence, including its relationships with its allies in Europe and elsewhere. It also emboldened dictatorships because they could always point out the U.S. does not live by what it preaches. And you saw the statement, overnight from Maduro in Venezuela, basically laughing and say, "You are busy telling us what to do. Look, you can't even run your own elections properly." So the U.S. in a way has lost a great deal as a result of the Trump presidency, and certainly the events of connected to the elections have deepened that erosion of influence. However, we have to bear in mind that in itself, I think, is a positive thing. It stops the rest of us, as we have been saying in this program, from looking elsewhere as models of doing things. Let's look into our own societies, our own systems, our own history, and our own aspirations, and develop the kinds of political systems and economic systems that will serve us for the best. And maybe just to close on that point, you asked earlier about whether the U.S. civilization is in terminal decline and so on. An argument can be made that the hegemony of the United States, economically and otherwise, is of course not what it used to be. There is hegemonic rivalry now between the U.S. and China, and I believe that much of this century will be, at least the first half of the century, we're going to see this hegemonic rivalry playing itself out. This is not the first time, of course, it's happened. It always happens as one major power rises, the old power, has to readjust itself, and sometimes this leads to war, and sometimes, of course, it leads to transformations in the global system that are not necessarily, as traumatic as war. But the U.S. superpower, sole superpower status is definitely on the way out.
Professor Vinny, one of the things you said was that, it's not as if the entire system is rotten to the core. And one of the things that we also did see from the communication that came from Mike Pence's office is that regardless of what happens, he was going to try, or not even try, but make sure that the rule of law would be upheld. And it's one of the things that seems to be clear, that even with the people who went into Capitol Hill yesterday, even with still the social impacts that people are talking about now, instead of calling them terrorists, you're calling them protesters. One thing that seems to ring through is that the rule of law will be upheld, that regardless of what happens, the rule of law will be honored and respected. Is that one thing that you can see, that regardless of whether there's shaking here or there, the rule of law, according to the United States system, will still hold?
I think so. I think so, and I think, again, it goes back to the political culture, that the belief, that the value, that the orientation in its aggregate. The rule of law could mean one thing for Black people and one thing for somebody else. But I think in its core, in its essence, I think the rule of law will be upheld, because I think it's crucial within the context of most people in the country have reached a consensus that the rule of law is important. It will be there. It will be upheld. And that is undergirded by our political culture.
All right. I think we want to thank you very much, professors, for joining us this morning and so sharing your insights. Let's see what happens out of the Congress, and then on the 20th, the swearing in of a new president and the new administration. And then going forward, what happens in terms of trying to bring America back on track, or bring that system of democracy back on track, trying to undo some of the harm that may have been done by the President Donald Trump's administration. Thank you very much, Professor Paul Zeleza, VC, USIU Africa, and Professor Cassandra Vini, Chair of the Department of International Relations, also at USIU Africa. Wish you a good day.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And keep it right here for more conversations as we observe what's happening in the States. And also we see whether Donald Trump will have a new avenue now that he doesn't have Twitter or Facebook and social media platforms on which to rant. So where else is he going to be able to reach out? So yeah, like you said, when they, the ones who are supporting Donald Trump, they're called protesters, okay? If they were blacks, they would call them hooligans, okay?
And terrorists.
And if they were Arab, you call them terrorists.
Mm.
So it's very clear that we define that very early on. In the next hour, let's talk about getting access to the vaccine. So the Ministry of Health, the CS for Health, has already announced that Kenya has ordered 24 million doses of the vaccine into the country. They'll expect it to arrive next month. What is it that we expect to see now with the rollout of the vaccines? Then what do you expect to see with the rollout of the next vaccine rounds and how they arrive? And what is the, like CT, you were saying, what kind of awareness creation needs to go out in this? Are we likely to also see some emergence of groups that are going to be opposing the vaccination exercise in Kenya? That and more coming up in the next hour. Good morning. It's now 9 o'clock.
Spice up your life. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi. Traffic.
Okay, looking much better in most parts of the city today. In and out of the CBD from Mombasa Road. Looks good. Not too bad. It builds up, again, around Cabanas, where the road has been impacted because of construction, out through past Capital Centre, and then out towards the Nyeri Stadium roundabout. That looks good. Huru Highway, however, as you get into the CBD, that's slowing down quite some. Everybody trying to get into the CBD, but you should be all right. Coming off of Langata Road, right around the T-Mall roundabout, there's a bit of a hold up there as you go towards Bagathue, but it won't last too long. As you get towards Valley Road then, or connecting with Ngong Road, you should be okay. Traffic is moving. It's moving slowly in some places, but we don't have any bumper-to-bumper situations this Thursday morning, so it's fantastic. Let us know, however, if you do get stuck or an incident, accident, anybody needs to know about. Spice of MKE, Twitter, or text 40127.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
It's 2 minutes after 9. We thank you very much for keeping it right here in The Situation Room for wherever you are. If you're tuned in through the radio or online on Spice FM KE, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or our website, spicefm.co.ke. We're into the fourth and final hour of the show, and in this hour we'll be talking about our own health and fight against COVID-19. But as we do that, before we do that, City, you know, that whole issue that Professor Vini and Professor Zeleza brought up of this particular lady in Georgia, Stacey Abrams, and what she's been able to do, what she's been credited of having been able to marshal up support and get the voters out and turning the state from red to blue, getting Biden-Harris elected, getting the 2 Senate seats going the Democratic route, that is not mean feat.
No. It's a monumental feat. And it's a monumental achievement. But you see, what has assisted her are the circumstances, and I think both professors brought out this point very well, the times in which we live, the situations that we are dealing with. Meaning, not only an atmosphere, but a platform seemed to have presented itself that made such a voice present. It isn't as though this person started thinking about this when these elections came about. I don't think so. I think this is something they've been doing before. But this time, those seeds found fertile ground. Because of whatever else has been happening. And because, again, one could actually say that inadvertently, the Trump administration and presidency has bequeathed many people certain gifts that perhaps would never have come their way if the presidency was not what it was. Look at the Black Lives Matter movement. It isn't as though this is something, okay, the label and the phrasing has given it a lot of momentum, but it isn't as though people have not been thinking about Black lives and how they matter, or lives of color and how they matter. They have. And there have been movements upon movements upon movements, but then at this particular point in time in our history and the history of America, it found very fertile ground. And it moved to the level where all the other activities that were previous to it have been trying to get it to, but now it was able to get there.
It was all there.
Yes.
Her future political career?
Well, that I think is interesting. Remember, you can be a mobilizer and you can be the face of mobilization, but it doesn't mean that people will necessarily elect you. What may happen is somebody may decide to appoint you and give you a position where you can exercise this same power in propagating certain things that may be of interest to people. But that would translate into a political life. It could.
It could.
But there are no guarantees.
Not necessarily, right?
No.
I saw some conversations in various platforms, even on social media, some people saying, maybe this is a time to consider a Harris Abrams ticket. Why not? Going to the next one. Okay, we've had a man-woman ticket. We have had a black man, white woman, a white man ticket. Now let's have 2 colored women ticket.
Academically speaking, it's interesting to contemplate. But from a practical political perspective, no. That is not the combination. It's a combination that you want to talk about and when you think of the possibilities.
Right.
But if you are talking about a possibility that could win someone an election, that isn't one of them.
It's not it?
No.
2 women of color.
Vying for the presidency?
Yeah.
No. It is interesting to contemplate. It would even be interesting to put in place to see how people think. But as to whether it's a winning combination, it isn't.
It isn't?
No, it
Why?
isn't. The reason why it isn't is this. The power that controls the voting system in the country of America is in the hands of white, rich organizations and individuals. Just start that way first.
Okay.
And there is a way in which they believe certain things should be done. Okay? So unless you're going to convince me that this representation that you presented would bring this to fruition, I don't see it doing so. There is always an attempt to make the electoral process and the people who present themselves to be representative. It's always an attempt to show that indeed this democracy they speak of actually works.
It works.
And that indeed it is a land of opportunities for everybody. But 2 women of color, don't see that happening. No, that it's not even a hard sell. It won't happen.
Wow. Okay. Have more conversations on this in coming days. Let's hear today's proverb before we talk about vaccines then.
The archer loves the arrow that flies as much as he loves the bow that remains.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Well, talk of democracy.
This is it, eh? Okay. So how many doses of vaccines are we expecting in the country next month? 24 million. Okay.
And where are they coming from?
Various sources, according to the CS for Health, right?
And does he mention the sources?
Let me look for that, where he's quoted as having said this yesterday. We have both public and private. No, not that. The government has procured vaccines alongside the Africa CDCs, which is a purchasing platform through the African Union, and the other is private healthcare partners. So the private healthcare partners are doing their thing as they're doing, but the government is basically purchasing these ones for the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is also will be accessed by private partners that would ship it into the country. So we're doing the AstraZeneca one, the first batch, according to what has been quoted here as and attributed to the CS for Health, Senator Mutahi Kagwe. Okay? And then when they arrive, then there's going to be now that whole prioritization of who gets, who doesn't. And then how do you address the fears of the public? Okay, so these vaccines have just arrived, and at the same time we are seeing them in these private hospitals, and at the same time we are not hearing who's being vaccinated, and at the same time you're hearing that doctors have been fired, so they're not getting the vaccine. So, so who's getting the vaccine if not the doctors because they've been fired, or the nurses because they've been... That whole issue will need to be very well managed. And it's a point there that also we need also to understand, so what is this vaccine and what is it all about? And to help us have this conversation this morning is Professor Omwanzala. Omwanzala is an expert on matters of virology, right? And he understands these matters very well. He's one of the people who we call the brain trust that has been advising the government on how to handle and manage the spread of COVID-19 in the country. Good morning, Professor.
Morning. How are you guys?
We are very well, thank you. And it's good to hear you this morning. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. It's a while since we talked. So you are staying safe?
Oh, yes.
Yes, COVID hasn't gone away, ladies and gentlemen. Stay safe.
We always try to do that, Prof. Now, in fact, before we even talk about vaccines, let's talk about the COVID. This curve, it goes up, it comes down. So from one moment, we are seeing positivity rate of double digit. Then within a couple of days and weeks, we see it come all the way back down to below 4%. And then we see it shoot up again. What is determining this pattern?
Yeah, you see from the very beginning when COVID started, 2019, and then 2020, we have been trying to understand, and I'm sure you guys recall me talking to you guys about the natural history. Yeah, now it's actually very, very clear. We are not talking of curves anymore. We are talking of actually spikes and as such. Because one thing now we know very well that at the end of it all, most of us, if not all of us, will end up getting exposed and infected with COVID as it is. The only game changer really will be the vaccine. And the reason why you are seeing these spikes and surges and the like is dependent on one, availability of tests. Because when you can't test enough, then you may not know who is out there, who is actually infected. Number two, it is also dependent on who is presenting with the signs and symptoms. And number three, who is also being tested. So whatever you are seeing in terms of the numbers, when you hear a positivity rate of 5%, these are the only few people we are testing. We are maybe by now, I would actually guess that maybe 30 to 40% of us have been exposed to COVID, got infected, and maybe never showed any signs, major signs and symptoms, recovered, and we are actually going on with our lives. So whatever you are seeing coming through as 5% and what have you, that's just a tip. And those are just suggestions from academia to give us a sense of decision making.
So if this is just a tip of the iceberg, Professor Nzala, then can it really fuel decisions that are made about how we should carry on? Because if we're saying 5%, okay, it's just an indicative idea of what the true case may be. We're not testing enough, like you've alluded to, not testing enough, so you don't get a true picture. So are decisions then made in the proper way if we're only getting just, a glimpse of what the case really could be.
Yeah, that glimpse gives you a good proxy to make decision on. But you see, the testing and the positivity rate is just one parameter. The other parameter we are also looking at, how many people are in hospital with COVID? How many of these individuals who are who have gone home to be isolated? But really a good indicator of really what would be the major problem is how many people are in hospital, in isolation facilities, in the healthcare facilities. How many of these are appearing as moderate to severe, and then how many of these individuals are in ICU? This is also a very good indicator of what is actually happening out there. So you can actually see that Europe now, the US, Britain, you can actually see even without issues of testing, they are overwhelmed with the number of people who are actually sick. That is another clear indicator. So for us, where we sit now, testing enough notwithstanding, we can actually say that things are not as bad, but we don't know what's going to happen in the next 1 month or 2 months, because we don't have as many people in ICU, we don't have as many people in isolation facilities, and we don't have as many people at home isolation. So you don't just look at one parameter, ladies and gentlemen. You bring all these parameters together, and then they actually help you make that decision as to what.
Professor, there's something that there's a question that has done the rounds, I think, with regards to COVID, and it is this. Anecdotally speaking, of course, that Africans in Africa, Kenya, our neighbors, are not as adversely affected by COVID as, say, the Europeans and the Americans. Now, two things, the truth about this, and if there's any element of truth to it, why is it so? And what brings it about?
Yes, very good. You see, observations are very clear. It is not only Africa, even India. We have a lot of colleagues we work with in India. India are also looking at the epidemic very clearly, realize that India is 1.1, 1.2 billion people. Yes, but you know, India again was one of the countries where there had been predictions that it will ravage India and finish Indians because of the mass population crowding. But actually that has not come to bear. So it is true, even just by observations, before we even go into hard studies and what have you, just by observations, what had been predicted before is not actually turning out. The epidemic in Africa has not been as has been predicted. That is clear, that is observations. But you see, part of it is that we are not out of the woods yet, because part of it is that the epidemic or this pandemic is still ravaging a lot of parts. You have also heard that, as we had said before, that the virus has changed and the virus is also mutating. So we don't know what's going to happen in the next 2-3 months. But just looking back, because we can only look back, because there are two ways. This is living experiment where we look back and try to focus, the future. So it is true, Africa has not been hit as much as had been predicted. And for us, from where I sit, we are looking at several levels that there could be what we call non-specific cross protection. That things that we have come across in our environment, various infections, elevate our immunity, elevate some levels of resistance, such that when a virus such as this comes, whatever immunity we had built might not be specific to this virus, but that aspect of it not being non-specific assists most of us, even if we get infected, not to end up with severe disease. So the current theory, we are looking at what we refer to as, mucosal immunity, and this is the protection, the first level of protection, what we call innate immunity within the mucosal surfaces, because you realize that the infection actually begins in the upper respiratory tract, the nose, the mouth, which we refer to as mucosal immunity. So there is something there among, certain individuals that is giving us some level of non-specific immunity, because we have looked for COVID antibodies prior to the emergence of COVID in this country, and we have not seen any COVID antibodies in our population.
There's a little bit of confusion, Prof, about what a vaccine will actually do. And I think it presents a great opportunity to explain it in the simplest terms possible, in terms of what a vaccine really does in the body. Because now there's talk of, and unfortunately misconstrued, that a vaccine will come and cure anybody who has COVID. Vaccine will 100% protect you from getting COVID. What exactly does this present now, even as this rollout talk begins?
Okay, vaccines, from the understanding, is actually a public health tool, and vaccines are geared towards prevention. Vaccines don't cure. Vaccines are meant to prevent. And vaccines will prevent you in this way. Vaccines can actually prevent you from getting infected, in the sense that once you are given that vaccine, it elicits an immune response. That immune response, in the terms we are talking about, is specific to COVID. So when that virus arrives, it finds a very clear, nice immune response that ensures that you don't get infected. That's one. Number two, vaccines can also work by preventing disease, meaning that you may get infected with COVID, but because you have already been immunized, then you don't actually develop disease. Or even if you develop disease, you don't develop severe disease, and then you also don't transmit this virus to anybody else. So those are the two levels, traditionally, where vaccines actually work. So for COVID, we are looking at two things: that either it will give you prevention from infection, what we refer to as sterilizing immunity, or it will give you prevention from disease. And you see, at any of this level is a win-win, because if it prevents me from infection, then it means that with time, we can actually eliminate and eventually eradicate. If it prevents us from disease, then really we will not overwhelm our healthcare system, because even if you get infected, the vaccine that you have been given will have elicited an immune response that ensures that you don't even need hospitalization. You might just have some common cold where you can be managed symptomatically, and you don't need any form of hospitalization. So those are the two levels of how vaccines work and how COVID vaccine is actually going to work.
I have a question that I'll ask about this, but I want to start first by asking, from your studies and observation with COVID-19, have there been many cases where somebody has had COVID-19, tested positive, recovered, tested negative, and then gotten reinfected with COVID?
Yes, there have been reports of that. And those reports are becoming more and more. And this is actually related to the fact that there are some individuals, even once they get infected, may not develop a proper immune system, proper immune response to the virus, or even if they do, that immunity declines very, very rapidly to levels where are not protective. And hence, if they become exposed again, they get infected. And that's why we are saying, even now, regardless of whether you are infected before or not, these vaccines will be given to all of us who are eligible, depending on how the government will organize. And we are saying that the vaccine is designed to elicit a better immune response than the natural infection and give you a higher immune response, which will actually last longer. And that's why we are saying, really, all of us should be advocates of this game changer, the COVID vaccine.
Professor, could you please explain a little bit what it is that you mean by an immune response and why this immune response is beneficial to the individuals who will actually receive the vaccination?
You see, immune response means this way, that there are two ways that we are protected from the ravages of various infections on a regular basis. Anytime you get exposed to an infectious agent, it will elicit what we call B cells, which will give you what we all know, antibodies. So antibodies are actually now soldiers, and these antibodies will be very specific to the infection that elicited this antibody. So if it is COVID, then these antibodies will be specific to COVID. Now, there's also T cells, which are also elicited. Again, these T cells will be very specific to COVID. So a combination of B cells, which give you antibodies, and a combination of T cells, then is what we actually call an immune response. So this is the immune response specific to COVID that we want this immune response to be there in sufficient quantities before one gets exposed to COVID, such that should you get exposed to COVID, this heightened immune response that is already there and specific will actually stop the infection, or if the infection occurs, stop you from getting any signs and symptoms of COVID. That's what we are actually talking about.
We also see that in many of the countries where now this vaccination has been rolled out, they're talking about getting multiple doses. In some, you get 2 doses. I think there are some that have talked about more than 2 doses. Why is it important to get 1 dose and then take a couple of days and get the second?
Yeah, it is a phenomena we call prime and boost. What you are doing is like the first, vaccine is priming. The first dose primes, the immune system. And then after 21 days, the second dose now comes and heightens that immune response even further. And that is a phenomena that is not is not new. You saw that previously we used to give measles only once. Now we are giving measles twice. You have seen that we used to give hepatitis B, for example. It's given 3 times. All right, polio, we give a variety of more than one. We give polio 3 times. So really the whole issue is that as you give additional doses, what you are doing is that you are actually giving the immune system a booster to heighten that immune system so that it will go in. If there were certain B cells specific to COVID at this level, when this vaccine comes in, it even takes these B cells to a much higher level so that your memory, because eventually what is important is what is left behind as memory. That memory is much heightened. And that's why you find that under normal conditions, we normally give the first dose, and then we want to boost later on to ensure that we heightened the immune system and have a higher memory of B cells and T cells so that the vaccine can last longer. That is the point. So that not the vaccine, but the immunity can last longer.
Okay. Yes. I want to ask this question because of the position you hold within the advisory group on this particular matter in the nation. 1, what is our preparedness? I mean, the details of our preparedness. 2, what is it that we've done with regards to ensuring that people, or have we set in motion that the individuals in this country will fully understand what the vaccine is all about and how it will be administered? And 3, are we going to talk about publicly how we are going to prioritize it and how it is we are going to actually distribute it?
Yes, you see, we are in a very unprecedented time, ladies and gentlemen. And not only Kenya, globally all over. The experience the world has had is the experience of giving vaccines to under 5s, 0 to 5. That is the experience, childhood vaccines. We are now talking of actually giving vaccines to adults outside of this paradigm where we have always known that vaccines are for children. Now, so there are 3 levels here. We are talking of vaccines. And for us, really, the issue is that what vaccines will be appropriate, for Kenya and appropriate for maybe Africa. All right?
All right, I think we've lost Prof. Let's try and get him back on the line. As we do that, we're going to take a quick break and look at traffic and weather. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. It's a Situation Room. We're speaking with Professor Omwanzala. He's an expert virologist, and he's one of those that has been advising the government and the Ministry of Health, especially in how to combat COVID-19. So he's just taking us through trying to understand vaccination, what the vaccine is all about, how it's going to be rolled out, and what the priority areas and prioritization would be in terms of the government thinking. So the vaccines are getting into the country. Who gets what first? How do we identify those that require it first? How do we create awareness so that by the time we're talking about a year or two, the entire population or most of the people in the population will then have received the vaccine? And then how do we also monitor the effect that this vaccine is having on individuals who actually get the vaccine? All that needs to be in place and all that needs to be aligned. Keep it right here. We'll be back shortly. It's 28 minutes after 9.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Spice up your life. They are smart, they are funny, and unfailingly entertaining. They are the adults in the room, and they are here to help you be the best adult you can be.
Just to be very honest with each other here, not all of us are going to get tall, dark, and handsome. Not all of us are going to get 0.5s or chotaras. Some of us have to learn the short guys. Some of us have to learn those pot belly people. Some of us have to learn older men or younger men.
Spice.
Don't ask your partner if he or she enjoyed it. I think the approach should always be, if she's enjoyed the journey, she will let you know.
Yeah.
She'll tell you, hey, maze, your bus is big. Mi sijaipanda basi kubwa kama hii. Juu hata hii basi, hiyo mafuta tulieka yote, imetuleta hapa vizuri. Hii basi iko na nguvu. Hii basi iko na nguvu.
Spice. Now into a relationship, it becomes like you've stopped your life, and then now me, I am your life. You see, like, what happened to your life? What happened to you? What did you
And
used to do?
women are guilty about that. No,
Is your wife listening to the show?
Whether it is matters of the heart, finances, or work that's weighing on your mind, worry not. The adults in the room will help you stay winning.
Okay, so still looking at clear conditions in Nairobi this morning. We will see highs, clear conditions, highs of 20 and lows of 16 today. Looking at other parts in Nyeri, looking at clear conditions throughout today, and also looking into Eldoret, clear conditions all the way through. We're looking also in, I beg your pardon, also looking in other parts of the country, Kakamega, highs of 30. We're looking at highs of 28 in Kisumu, and then out of Kenya into Kampala, where it was raining this morning, we'll see highs of 28, and then in Dar es Salaam, raining this morning as well, with highs of 32.
Spice FM, Malindi. Traffic.
Much better. Got much better in certain parts of the city today. Coming off Mombasa Road, not as crazy as it was earlier. It wasn't actually really crazy today. Getting into the CBD, not causing too much of an issue. So the traffic situation seems to have settled down a little bit this morning. In and out, especially in Nairobi. We're not seeing any other problems around the country in different parts either. Coming out of Westlands, coming back into Nairobi, coming out of Westlands, getting into the CBD and out is looking good. Coming off of Thika Road, as we were seeing, as was earlier, a little bit of a snarl up there at the underpass and coming off Kiambu Road as well. But much better now. Don't forget, through the day, you can get in touch on Spice FMKE on Twitter or text on 40127.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Spice FM.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right.
28 minutes to 10
94.4 Spice FM.
Professor Omwanzala. Before we were disconnected, you were telling us about what the government needs to consider. So first of all, here we are talking about vaccination of adults. The government is used to dealing with children, and there are things that need to be put in place. So what about that?
Yes, actually, so there are three levels. There is the vaccine, there is the vaccinators, and there is the vaccine. The vaccine, the appropriate vaccine will actually be, for us, will be the Chadox vaccine. And this is the one that is stored at 2 to 8 degrees. And that's why we say that Africa must choose the appropriate, and Kenya will choose that. So the vaccine, the only issue with the vaccine is maybe costs involved, and who will actually buy it for us. But what I hear now is that the government is putting in 24 million doses. And if you say 24 million doses, that will mean you're only going to give it 12 million people, because each person requires 2 doses. Exactly. And then what we have also done in terms of vaccinees is that we've actually said that this vaccine will first of all be given to healthcare workers because of risk of exposure and infection. And then number 2, it will also be given to people with comorbidities, people with underlying conditions, because of also risk of severe disease. Then we have also talked of of teachers because of the exposure to children, and we know that children may have COVID and not present with any form of disease. And then we are also talking of men and women in uniform. So far, this is the group that government is actually prioritizing for now. These individuals are amounting to around 11 to 12 million. So if we can get these doses, so the vaccine might not be a problem. The problem now comes with the vaccinators. And within these vaccinators is the elephant in the room. And these are the logistics. What would it take to actually vaccinate 11 million people? How long do you want this to take? That is the elephant. So when I say vaccinators, I mean the logistics of bringing this vaccine at the airport, moving this vaccine within the cold chain from the airport to the various facilities that have been designated as facilities where these vaccines will actually be administered, and ensuring that it's cold chain, having enough healthcare workers to ensure that they are there 24/7 to administer this vaccine, but ensure that other healthcare programs continue completely uninterrupted. So that second thing of vaccinators and the attended logistic to it is actually the elephant in the room. And that's where we shall either make or actually break. Realize, for example, the US had said that by the end of 2020, that is end of last December 2020, they had estimated that they should have vaccinated 20 million people. By end of December, the US had only vaccinated 2 million. Not because there was no vaccine, but it's because of this second aspect of vaccinators and the logistics of it. So it's the healthcare professionals who need to do that, and the facilities and the distribution network that is required. Then the third thing is the vaccinees, the individuals, these healthcare workers, these comorbidities. Where are they? And how are we going to reach them? Are we going to be walking from house to house, or are we going to have a standalone sites where these individuals will be invited to come? So these are not easy matters, ladies and gentlemen. There is a group working on this, day and night, but this is where the whole issue of working with adults and ensuring that as you do this, all your other healthcare workers, all your other healthcare programs actually go on. So vaccines, the vaccinators, and the vaccinees. So by now, really,
there's a small matter that is specific to Kenya, and this is something that the public would like to know. The plans for distributing the vaccines to the counties. You've laid it out beautifully and it's easy to understand. But the vaccines will definitely go to counties. How exactly is the government going to distribute them? And 1, 2, What is our current status in terms of the ready population of healthcare workers who are able to actually administer this vaccine? And I say this against the backdrop of all the sackings that we've now read about and heard about
And
strikes of healthcare workers. Against this background,
I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, as I'm sitting here, and I sometimes cry for our healthcare. We are in turmoil. Ever since we went into this devolved system, we are totally healthcare. The public healthcare system is falling apart, as we watch. My prayer, and we are trying to tell government, COVID vaccine, an administration of COVID vaccine cannot be left to counties. This must be the Ministry of Health from the central region ensuring that they will say, if there's a facility in Kakamega, it will be managed by these individuals. If there's a facility in Kisumu, it will be managed by these individuals. So it cannot be that this vaccine is picked from here and just taken to Kakamega and left there. If that is done, it will be exactly what is happening in the US. That's exactly what happens in the US. The US picked these vaccines and took them to the various various states and said now the state takes over in terms of the vaccinators. And this is what I mean by the logistics. And most of them were actually not ready. So for us, really, let's learn from the others. Britain has done it very, very well because it took the charge centrally, so that even if you are moving and saying that I'm setting up base in the Western region, then it has to be managed from the central office. We should not again say that healthcare is devolved and then we take these vaccines to the regions and live there. If we do, it will get wasted. So what we are trying to advise government is that we don't want house to house. Let us have fixed sites, fixed positions, depending on how much money they have, how much healthcare workers, and then begin to communicate to communities with the various, the ones we have actually listed, and have a plan. How many can we do per day? How will they actually come? That is the aspect we are saying. But my prayer is that we cannot say that we move this to the county and live there. At the status where we are now, most of the counties are totally understaffed, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of all aspects of healthcare workers, from doctors to nurses. So you cannot again expect the same doctors and nurses and clinical officers and others who are already on their day-to-day job to be the ones to be plucked to go and do these aspects of it. It will not happen.
Okay, so the vaccine comes next month. We're talking about a matter of 3 weeks. That's when the deployment will happen. And this plan that you talk about, Professor Nzala, necessary to be put in place in order to see, because obviously, like you said, it's not just going to come here and then we're going to guess what's going to happen. Plan needs to be put in place. When do you think that this plan should be put in place in order to have things ready? Shouldn't it be by now?
The plan should be by now. Now, we even should have actually done dry runs. The plan should be now. The healthcare workers who are going to administer this vaccine should actually be on board. The sites, the fixed sites we are talking about, should actually be there. My approach should have been that these fixed sites should not necessarily be hospitals. We are not vaccinating sick people. We are vaccinating healthy, normal people. These sites should not really be hospitals, but should be sites that are already identified. And we should now be talking to the communities that if you have this and this is exactly where this vaccine will be available. These are the healthcare workers. We should actually be doing dry runs. And I'm talking like this because India has actually done that. India wants to vaccinate. They are talking of 100 million people. Can you imagine? Yes. They are talking of in the regions of 100 million people. So how do they do that? It's not a walk in the park. By now, ladies and gentlemen, we should actually be seeing discussions of the fixed sites, discussions of the healthcare workers who are being trained will actually administer these vaccines. logistics should actually be in place in terms that we have the right storage, conditions. We have needles and syringes. All these things should actually be available. The individuals with comorbidities in the various regions should have been mapped out. We should be knowing Kakamega, there are 30, maybe 2,000 people. And then I forgot actually the elderly, those who are actually 55 years and above. That is part of this group. So we should be knowing how many are they, so that when now you are moving the vaccine, you know very well, I'll take so many doses to Western region, so many doses to the Eastern region, so many doses to coast. So really, it seems easy, but it is totally not easy. And if we just learn from what the US has experienced, estimating to do 20 million people, and you only end up doing 2 million, tells you that even in the best of conditions, there are going to be difficulties. So for me, really, we should not just be hearing that we have ordered 20 million. That's not enough. That's the easy part, that is the easy part, bringing the vaccines in. But the difficult part is the vaccinators and the vaccinees. And the vaccinators have unpacked for you is all that logistics, cold chain, healthcare workers, the storage, the movement, and then getting to know, do the elderly already know that they are going to be the first priority? I don't know.
All those things that you're saying, Prof, to the best of your knowledge, because you sit in a position where you have access to the information of what is happening in terms of the planning and the logistics and putting in place all these measures that you've said, how far have these conversations taken place? To the best of your knowledge, with about, let's even give it 6 weeks' time, with a 6-week lead time, are we anywhere close to even starting to identify, for example, who are the vaccinees going to be, and the vaccinators and the logistics? Have we started that?
Yeah, the process started. The process actually started last year. The first thing was really to figure out. We didn't want to raise high expectations and then fail. We wanted to wait a bit and see the data coming out of the three top candidates: the Pfizer, the Moderna, and then the AstraZeneca ChAdOx vaccine. And once the data was actually good, it was clear. And then also being part, Kenya joining the CDC, the COVAX agreement, so that they can also take this. So discussions actually started around October, November last year. They are actually going on, at a very heightened, speed. And as I'm telling you, all these things I'm talking about are all being discussed. They are on the table. It is not easy, but my only fear is that we are a bit delayed. We don't want, the vaccines, the doses to arrive, and then we don't begin immediately. So we are actually really trying to push the ministry further to ensure that we are up there and we are already communicating to ensure that things are happening. Even if we can't do each county, then can we actually agree on regional to allow us to have actually regional, because no more people can travel. If I'm told the vaccine is being given in Kiambu, I'm in Nairobi, and I'm told book, I can't go to Kiambu because I'm not sick. So that's exactly what we are saying. So these things are critical. And then also beginning to address the skeptics. We have a lot of skeptics, and we have a lot of those we call vaccine hesitancy, people who cannot make a decision quickly. So again, we should be having, communication, and I'm glad we are talking about this to address the issue of skeptics, because there are people who are rumor mongers who are giving information, this vaccine has not been tested very well. So all these things should actually be addressed, because you also don't want to spend so much money with a product only to end up that a lot of vaccinees who are eligible are also not showing up.
So is the message then, Prof, that the vaccine is here, come out and get vaccinated? Is that the message then that should run through with all of these other plans and logistics that are being set in place?
Yes, it really, when we say healthcare workers, you see there'll be organizations in Nairobi, in every county. They will be organized in such a way that how do the healthcare workers access this and through what system? Maybe healthcare workers, a vaccine can be taken to the various institutions and they are given. But for the rest, individuals with comorbidities, teachers, the elderly, men in uniform, the game might actually be different. So the idea is that we should, by now, we should actually be having very good communication saying that the first priority will be this segment of society. This is how they are defined. This is who they are. So if you fulfill any of these criteria, please know that you'll be the priority, and this is exactly where you'll actually be required, or this is what you'll be required to do, ABCD. And do dry runs. For me, I come from experience where I've done a lot of clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2. We always do dry runs to ensure that everything is in place. And also realize that there are two aspects people are also not talking about. This vaccine is being given under what we call emergency use authorization, meaning that the clinical trials are not complete, as opposed to a vaccine which goes through all the clinical trials. It is licensed and then in various countries, and then it's administered. So emergency use authorization then requires that also those individuals who are being given the vaccine need also to consent, because it is also part of like an extended phase 3. So there'll be need to also collect a little bit of data to ensure that you are also collecting a bit of data. Are there any additional side effects that are not being seen? So this is the real understanding of emergency use. So there are two aspects: emergency use authorization and the use of vaccine that is already gone through the entire process, been proved to work, has been licensed. So Africa is just Kenya, and individuals can license and actually bring the product.
What is the likelihood that the things that you have mentioned, and again laid out very, very clearly, will actually be organized, brought to bear, so that when we do get the vaccines, we are actually able to administer them to our people? On a scale of 1 to 10, what would you say is the likelihood?
Now there you're putting me on the spot.
Professor, that's not the idea, but go around it and explain it in a way that doesn't put you on the spot.
Well, you see, for me, really, from what I've seen, Kenyans, and maybe you guys can also let me know, actually Kenyans are acceptable to these vaccines. A large majority of Kenyans are acceptable to these vaccines. So we will not have problems of vaccinees. The only thing is that we need to organize it very well so that these vaccines can actually, the vaccinees can actually be told how and when to get to the immunization centers. The biggest problem really is the vaccinators, getting enough logistics from the healthcare all the way to ensuring that there is cold chain and everything else. So the major problem will actually be that second aspects of vaccinators with the attendant logistics. So what I can say, okay, let me just be bold enough and say between the scale of 5 to 10, we might be hovering around 5.
Well, I think you're being very generous.
Thank you. At least, yes. With 5, there's hope.
Yeah, and that's what I'm actually saying. 50%. We can do that with all the difficulties. But also the whole issue will be funding. Funding is not easy because, again, these vaccinators will not be volunteers. I'm sure these will be people who need to be remunerated for the hard work they will actually be, be doing, because vaccinating 11 million people, gentlemen, is not easy. And the issue is the duration. The longer you take, then it becomes useless, because you want to be able to say, I'm giving you a vaccine now. Today is the 6th. Within another 21 days, I want to give you the second dose. And that's when now we say you are fully immunized and you are fully protected. If that doesn't happen, then we shall have individuals who have a partial immune response to this virus. And this is from the understanding of immunology. Now, this is the environment that actually enhances mutations.
We've seen that issue, the logistical issue, actually cropping up in the UK as well, where they were supposed to get now the second dose after 21 days, and then the government came and said, you can do it even within 3 months. What is the longest that you can take between dose 1 and dose 2 for it to be still be effective?
From the data we have received, out of the 3 vaccines, 21 to 28 days. Yes. And from the virology and immunology point of view, when you are partially immunized, you are actually, 1, a risk to yourself, and then 2, you risk that if you get infected, the virus is partially, the immunity partially handles that virus, and it doesn't handle it very well. And it is this kind of partial immune pressure that enhances mutations. And these are the mutations. Mutations can go either way. You can have mutations where the virus actually mutates itself and disappears, like the SARS-CoV that appeared in 2002, 2003. That virus was only in Asia and disappeared completely. So it mutated itself out of existence. Or the virus could actually mutate, become more severe, and actually become endemic. And that's what we want to try and avoid.
Okay, so I mean, we're looking at it. I mean, the way you've explained it, very clear in terms of what needs to happen, and then we have a situation in the country which doesn't quite allow for the flowing, health services that we would like. And now here we have a situation where we require the health services or health workers to be in tandem with government for the adequate and proper rollout of this. Would you then advise at this point that government gets all its ducks in a row in terms of, being in good stead with health workers for this, if not for anything, for this purpose alone, to say, fix this in order for us to then get the logistics in order for vaccination of Kenyans?
You see, we talk on a regular basis. Some of the CECs in the various counties are actually our colleagues, medical doctors, just like us. The healthcare problem, ladies and gentlemen, is a big problem. The Kipia doctors have never been resolved, which is the other county. Kisumu, we have had upheavals, very insufficient terms of human resource levels of employment. To me, if something can be done and be done, very quickly, we might be sitting pretty saying that, we have not seen very severe outbreak, or the predictions were actually not as have not come true. But the virus has actually not gone away. We are now hearing of mutations in South Africa, some variants in the Congo. I mean, not Congo. I think Angola and the like. There's the variant in Britain. We have also had variants now in the US. And these variants look more infectious. So we actually don't know in the next 3 months how our epidemic is actually going to turn around. And there is no proof that these variants they're talking about are not here, because Britain only got to know because they were sequencing these strains at a much higher level than any other country. That's why they were quickly to identify this. So really, I don't know if you guys are in a position to talk to the governors and what have you, call them, just tell them that we want our healthcare system to go back for now, for the sake of COVID. COVID has not gone away. We see the fears that are there in schools. We are urging our colleagues in the various counties to go back to work, to stop this strike. Things can be agreed on amicably on the table. You can be promised pay later, but also ensure that salaries are paid to healthcare workers. It's amazing, ladies and gentlemen, that there are people who are employed, go to work, and can actually go for 2 to 3 months without a salary. It is unfair.
That's
Totally
very true. Prof, you know, when you talk to the governors, the ones that we speak to, they tell us they are on top of things. It's only that the workers are the ones who are pulling them down. So, I mean, we are where we are as a country, and sometimes the kind of frustration that we hear from professionals such as yourself, you're sitting here, you're saying, we are not yet out of the woods. In fact, we do not even know where we are, at what point we are in the woods. And then we see those who have been given that responsibility acting as if, well, it's just one other day. The sun is rising, the sun is going to set. Then it gets frustrating for all of us. But thank you very much, Professor, for speaking to us this morning. We hope to speak to you again soon.
No, any day. And just let's deal with the skeptics. Let's deal with those with the hesitancy. There's really no problem with these vaccines, the way, they have been tested. I understand immunology and vaccines, very well. So let's keep talking. And my hope is that the things we've talked about, maybe in the next 1 week or so, you'll actually begin to hear more detailed information about, the vaccine, the vaccinators, and the vaccinees. Thank you.
My God, we just hope so. Thank you very much, Prof, and have a good day.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And thank you very much for tuning into the Situation Room today. We're coming to the top of the hour. Very good insights there from Professor Omu and Zala. We'll be discussing them tomorrow. Those 3 Vs, the vaccine, the vaccinators, and the vaccinees. That's a conversation that we are going to hammer every single day for the next 1 year, okay? Until we make sure that everybody understands what's happening. CT, today's proverb.
The archer loves the arrow that flies as much as he loves the bow that remains.
The archer now.
Bow and arrow story, really.
So, the proverb here is about the archer or the bow and arrow? Or love?
Actually, it is about love.
Okay.
Yes. The broad, wide, embracing nature of love and all-inclusive nature of it. So, whether it seems...
So basically, there's another one. There's Kikuyu one, the Swahili ones. You love the cow and the rope.
You do. You do.
Panda ng'ombe na mkanda wake.
Yes, exactly.
You just don't love one.
No.
You love both.
No. One comes with the other.
One comes with the other.
And one is made relevant by the other. And vice versa. And moving forward swiftly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So we accept those who are working and those who are not working. They're ours. Tuwapende tu wote.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay then. If you insist.
The government with money is still ours. The government without money is still ours.
The ones that have doctors are ours. The ones that don't have doctors are ours.
Yep.
Good Lord. Okay, see you guys tomorrow. Tomorrow is Friday. First Friday of the year. What do you want to say?
Happy Friday in advance.
There you go. Happy Friday in advance. Happy Thursday. See you tomorrow.